game. Hey there, how have you been? It feels like it's been a while, right? Well, it's been 19 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days since the event. Simon and I like to call this time PE, which stands for post-event. The event refers to when my marriage ended publicly. I used the giant screen at Wrigley Field to confront my wife, Deanna, about her unfaithfulness. In case you forgot, my name is Ryan. I have 3 kids, one of whom I adopted. I also have an ex-wife, Deanna, and I live in the suburbs of Chicago now. I used to live in Crystal Lake, but let me not rush ahead. So what has changed since the event? A lot. I'm divorced now, obviously. I no longer live in Crystal Lake. After the divorce, I was granted custody of the kids because Deanna didn't have a stable job, and I had both the house and a good job. It just made sense. The judge, an older woman with big glasses, didn't seem pleased with how everything unfolded during the case. When it came out that I was involved with the Jumbotron, she gave me a furious look, even though my hacker friend Solomon made sure there was no evidence tying me to it. She usually favored the mother getting everything, but in this case the facts were clear. In the end, I got custody, which meant Deanna had to pay me child support. I had to pay her alimony, but it all balanced out, so we both moved on with our lives. We agreed that if I sold the house, she'd get half, and I'd manage the mortgage until then. I wasn't thrilled about it, but that's how it goes. Overall, I think things turned out as well as they could have under the circumstances. I didn't start this mess. I just had to finish it. I had to keep my life together for the kids, even though it was tough at times. Being a parent means facing challenges head-on. I can only imagine how Deanna felt waking up without the kids. But everyone makes choices, and I'm not sure I have much sympathy for those who can't own up to them. I eventually moved to Naperville. It was mostly to avoid being stuck with the mortgage payments that Deanna would benefit from if I sold the house. Even though she wasn't helping with the payments, I would be responsible for them alone if I sold. And she would still get half the money when I sold the house. I didn't think that was fair at all. I could put another $100,000 into the house, and she would get 50 of it when it sold, even though she didn't help at all. The memories in that place were hard to deal with. Some mornings I would wake up expecting to see Deanna making coffee, but then I would remember that wasn't going to happen, and the day would start poorly. It was strange to feel both relieved and sad about her absence at the same time. It was like feeling hot and cold all at once. One feeling would always lead to the other. It's hard to explain unless you've experienced it. When it came to Deanna, I tried to stay away from her, especially when she came to pick up the kids. We had to communicate. You can't co-parent without talking. Most of it was through text or short emails. We did have to meet up a few times for the kids' sake. Paula went through a phase where she took things that weren't hers, and we had to figure out how to handle it together. It was awkward. We slipped back into being partners when it came to the kids, but the tension of being exes was definitely there, especially for me. We didn't talk about what happened between us, but at least she stopped trying to say sorry. Oddly, she never asked for forgiveness. I think it's because she just assumes I would give it. But I'm not interested in discussing it. If she wants to, that's up to her. I just want to move forward. After I asked her to leave, she sent me a video of her in therapy, trying to understand her actions. At the end, she said she was coming for me and that it wasn't over, that she wanted me back. I even sent her a text one night when I had too much to drink asking, "What would you do to make it up to me?" I was really curious about her response, but all I got was the word anything. Then nothing more. That was over a year ago, and it's never been mentioned again. I don't plan on bringing it up either. She's the one who said she was coming for me. Let her take action. I'm just trying to get on with my life. I gave her pretty much unrestricted access to the kids because it seemed fair. She hadn't done anything wrong to them, just to me, and she was a great mom. I had already changed their lives enough when I asked her to leave, so it didn't make sense to complicate things more. She had one or more of the kids almost every weekend, and sometimes Paula during the week too. We managed to make it work as best as we could, staying focused on the kids. Then we moved to Naperville. When I sold the house, I was shocked to find that its value had nearly doubled, even in these times. Deanna and I each made $85,000 from the deal, so when we moved, I rented a house, paid for 2 years in advance, and then thought about what to do next. Oh right, the job. Sorry, I got sidetracked. As you know, I was a vice president at Dresden, a company that makes high-quality custom furniture. Paul had been promoted, and the board hired a new guy, Mark Higley. He seemed friendly enough, with nice hair, but he didn't really know what he was doing. He believed he was the right choice for the job, even though he had no experience in the business and didn't know the people who worked for him. My official role was to lead the sales team, but I ended up managing the company while the new boss sat in his office, lost in his own thoughts. He would give me big orders. I would say, sure, and then carry on with my own work, just like I had done with Paul. 6 months into this, Higley called me to his office and said, "I've noticed you're involved in areas outside of sales. The other department leaders aren't doing their jobs well, so I've sent a memo asking them to step up. You won't have to deal with them anymore, which should give you more time." I'm not naive. My wife had been unfaithful for weeks without me knowing, so I wasn't always the quickest thinker. But I understood this for what it was, a power play. I knew if I went to the board, they would side with him since they had hired him. The nice increase in my salary, which had been done to make it higher than his, wasn't going to lead to more responsibility. It was just the board's way of making sure someone was in charge. Now that person was going to be Mark Higley, not me. He had spent 6 months watching me, and now he was trying to push me out. I just sat there, nodded, didn't say much, and by lunchtime, I had my resignation letter ready. I returned to his office, gave it to his secretary, who understood perfectly what it was, and then I went back to my office to start clearing out my things. I was gone by 1:30. By 2 o'clock, I had 2 calls from board members wanting to keep me on calls I politely declined. By 3:30, I was at a local bar called The Cottage, just off the main street of Crystal Lake. By 4 o'clock, most of the Dresden team was there, having drinks, trying to convince me to stay, and enjoying a break from work. I learned later from Paul that the board had a meeting that night to decide what to do about the situation. They voted 4-6 to let Mark Higley go and to choose me, but he had enough supporters on the board, or maybe they just didn't like the way I looked, and nothing changed. To be honest, even though I had put my all into that company, I wasn't too upset leaving. When they chose someone else to be CEO, my loyalty was pretty much gone, and I had already been thinking about my next steps. After the conflict with Deanna, my focus was on the kids. I had put a lot of effort into my job, but the enjoyment was no longer there. I wanted to try something new, I just didn't know what it would be. Now I had no choice. So off to Naperville we went for a fresh start, as Solomon would say, and that is where we live now. Solomon visited a couple of times and spent time with Simon and me. He seemed the same, still awkward in social situations, but really smart. He moved on from drinking for fun to exploring relationships. I have no idea how he meets women since he usually annoys people quickly. I even wondered if he was somehow cloning them, which felt like something he would do, but he seemed happy. Oh, there was one more thing that happened. Once my story was out, some people from Hollywood reached out to me, wanting to buy it for a movie. I traveled to Hollywood and spent a week with a married couple of producers who were really nice, but it was hard not to feel a bit jealous. The husband was the ideal man, and his wife looked like someone from an old movie, like one with Ingrid Bergman. It was hard to watch how into each other they were, always holding hands and exchanging glances. At dinner, they even fed each other and completely forgot I was there. It felt quite awkward. I thought a good relationship should have some teasing and disagreements, not just dreamy gazes. They had recently made a movie about a man losing weight and were trying to find new stories for a television channel. Honestly, I wasn't paying much attention since I was busy looking for familiar faces without being too obvious. Paula was thrilled when she found out I was going to Hollywood and insisted on coming with me. When I dropped her off with Deanna, she was not pleased at all. I brought her back some nice things and promised I would take her with me next time. They invited me to a party in the Hollywood Hills, where I had a chance to really see what Hollywood was like. I stood on the balcony, taking in the amazing view of Los Angeles that was hard to stop looking at. A young woman came up to me and made small talk, then bluntly asked if I was a producer, since she saw me talking to the couple who brought me. I told her I wasn't important, and she smiled, saying she needed to see who else was there. That was the end of our conversation. Since I wasn't someone special, I didn't matter much to her. The next day, I signed a contract, let them take my story, and received a check for just under $150,000. I smiled a lot and then left. Nothing happened with the story afterwards. Later I learned it was in turnaround. This means it was bought, but no one wanted to make it into a show. It's apparently quite common, and I was okay with that. I didn't want to embarrass Deanna any more than I already had, so I was fine with it never being made. I still got paid. However, I found it funny that the name of the production company on the check was Heinz the Cat Productions, only in Hollywood. Besides that, the only other notable thing was my new job. I kind of stumbled into it. I had thought about wanting to do something in the mobile or web field. Watching Paula with her phone and iPad, I noticed how much time she spent using them, so I figured I would try to create an app or something similar instead of working for someone else. I bought a laptop and joined a local shared workspace where I could come in each day, sit down, and work. They had meeting rooms and many resources, but the best part was being around all the talented people who worked there. I just sat with my laptop, learning from them and wondering if there was an opportunity for me. Eventually, I met two guys who were older than most there, but very smart. Their names were Deke Simpson and Kevin Bile. Deke was the programmer, and Kevin worked as both a coder and a designer. They wanted to create a game and had it all planned out, but it quickly became clear that they struggled with scheduling and making things happen. They were knowledgeable in their field, but seemed unsure about how to put everything together. They were typical tech enthusiasts. They knew their stuff, but lacked direction, and boy, could they talk. Within an hour of meeting Kevin and Deke, I learned that Kevin was a part-time sculptor and also wrote stories as a hobby. Deke created screenplays and taught Aikido. They shared so much information that I could hardly get a word in. They needed someone to help fund their game. I decided to support them. I signed a contract to fund and run the new company while they worked on a mobile card game based on a group of gods. We rented an office, and I spent a lot of time with my lawyer friend, Jonathan Brudy, preparing legal documents, and we started to develop the game. I quickly learned about video games and how they are made. Speaking of Jonathan, I became closer to him than I expected. He turned out to be very kind. He checked in on me, making sure I had a place to go during holidays or when Deanna had the kids. His wife, who I had dated before any of us were married, was also nice to me. It felt good to have friends who were not connected to Deanna. They could talk about her without worrying about seeing her. I tried dating a few times, but it didn't go well. Online dating brought some nice women, but they all seemed to have their own issues. As an ex-salesperson, I could read people's body language and tone, and many of these women were looking for something specific. One woman was very direct, saying she wanted a new father for her kids and would make it worthwhile for him. I didn't think that was a good way to start a relationship and told her so, which made her quite upset. Honestly, I wasn't very interested in dating. I had trust issues, and the hurt from Deanna's actions still affected me. I knew this. I even visited Jim, the therapist who had helped Deanna, but it didn't make much difference. He was hard to talk to, especially knowing he had heard everything Deanna shared. I went a few times, but when I didn't feel better, I stopped. I realized that when I went on dates, I had little patience. If a woman said something silly or did something that annoyed me, like flicking her hair for attention, I would get frustrated inside. I talked about this with the therapist during one of my visits, and it took time to understand that I was unconsciously comparing these new women to Deanna, and that made me uneasy. I wanted her out of my life. I didn't want to still care for her. Jim told me it was normal to compare new people to Deanna. I had been with her for years, and she was a big part of my past. It wasn't that I was still in love. It was just hard to think of someone else when I had no other reason to compare. I was looking for someone like her. Before the incident, my life with Deanna had felt really good. Now it seemed unlikely I would find someone who compared. I needed to go out with many people to see if I could find a match, someone to fill Deanna's place. The truth was, I couldn't really know what life would be like with someone else until I tried. You can't tell much about a person on a first date. People tend to show only their best side when they first meet. You don't find out their true habits until you're close with them. What Jim said made sense, though it was comforting to think I wasn't desperately in love with Deanna. Maybe I was, or maybe not. I wasn't sure anymore. Most days I was just trying to get through, so I stopped dating. I figured if I was meant to find love again, it would happen without me searching. I focused on my new business and the kids. This was just a way to cover for how low I felt about myself. I couldn't handle any more rejection, even when I was the one walking away. I hadn't heard much from Deanna besides what we needed for the kids. Despite her saying she was coming for me, life went on. We had seen the first version of the game. Most of the art wasn't ready, but it worked, and I was excited about that. Then everything changed unexpectedly. In another part of town, plans were being made for me. Deanna hit the coffee table, making the cups shake. "Ladies, listen up, it's time." The four women sitting around the table stopped chatting and looked at Deanna, who was sitting on the edge of the couch. One leaned forward and said, "You're very intense, dear." Her voice was full of sarcasm. Deanna shot her a quick glare and took a breath. "Okay, it's official. Jim gave me the go-ahead this week. Operation Ryan is a go." One of the other women picked up her cup and asked, "Are you sure? Jim said everything was okay?" "Well, he didn't say it exactly like that," Deanna replied. "But he did say I was ready to move forward in my life. He mentioned that we had talked about most things we could. He advised me to start planning and getting on with it. I take that as a good sign for my efforts to win Ryan back." "Is it really a good sign, though?" the other woman challenged. Deanna shot her a frustrated look. "Look, are you going to help or not? Making snarky comments isn't helping." "Oh, of course. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. You've been in therapy for a while, trying to figure out what you did and why. It's been a tough road. Honestly, when you wanted to join our group, I had mixed feelings. You clearly have some issues, but I believe everyone deserves a chance to get things right. I just want to be sure that before we try to change someone's life, we are doing it with good intentions." "It's not like that, Gina. I'm not trying to control anyone. I'm just trying to show Ryan that I deserve another chance. I'm not the same person I used to be. I need Ryan to see me again and to let me prove I can be someone he can trust. I want to be the partner he needs. It's not manipulation. It's about getting that opportunity." Gina leaned back, her frown clear. She was tall and fit, with arms that looked strong from working out. She wore comfortable workout clothes that showed off her figure. The other women wondered if she was actually going to the gym later, or if she just liked them because they fit so well. Gina could be blunt, always telling it like it is, but she had a big heart. She was ready to help if someone needed it, even if it meant giving away her favorite shirt, probably still a little sweaty. The women at the table exchanged looks. They all remembered sitting in similar spots, feeling the same urgency at different points in their lives. "All right. We're all here for you, Deanna. What's your plan?" another woman asked. "Thank you, Rhonda. So, here's the situation. After I sent Ryan that video, he texted me asking how I could fix the hurt between us. I replied anything, but honestly, that was the problem. I didn't know what to do, and it wasn't fair to just put that on him. He clearly didn't know either, or he wouldn't have asked. So now I need to figure out what I can do to help Ryan open his heart to me again. I understand that trust takes time to rebuild, but I have to be present for that to happen. Right now, I'm not. What I need is the chance to show him I've changed. I want him to see that I'm ready to do anything. So ladies, how can I show that?" Rhonda leaned back and looked at the women beside her. "May, what do you think?" Rhonda had long blonde hair that often needed a clip. She was of average height and weight, and she looked nice in her sundress. Her most noticeable feature was her accent. She was Finnish, from Helsinki. Rhonda was honest and did not worry much about nudity or other cultural taboos. She had a playful sparkle in her eye and was the kind of woman who could surprise you with her bold comments. May, the older woman, thought for a moment, then said, "I understand where you're coming from, but this won't be easy. You need him to see you in a new light, but also the same way as before. Your relationship needs to feel fresh, but still hold on to what made it strong in the past. You have to remind him of the good moments without bringing up the reasons it ended. It's a tricky situation, that's for sure." May was in her 60s, but looked much younger. She had let her hair go gray, which suited her well. Her clothes were stylish, showing she had some wealth without being flashy. She had nice accessories, like a designer handbag and a quality watch, hinting at her class without showing off. She also had a slight southern accent. "I have some ideas to share with you, but I want to wait for this special guest to arrive first," she added casually. Just then the doorbell rang and Deanna put down her coffee and went to answer it. "That must be them." When she opened the door, a middle-aged man in a suit stood there, smiling and holding a bottle. He had a head full of sandy hair. "Oh, thank you. That's very nice of you," Deanna said, taking the bottle. "But we won't need it for our planning." I wasn't sure if we might need it, just in case, the man said with a bit of hesitation. Deanna laughed and invited him in. Come and meet the ladies. As the man entered, he closed the door behind him. Everyone, this is the special guest I mentioned, Deanna announced cheerfully as she returned to the group. The women looked at the newcomer in surprise, even May setting down her coffee. No one spoke, the women looked at the man, and he looked back, creating a tense moment. Finally, Deanna broke the silence. Oh, come on. He's just a guy. It's not like he's dangerous. May laughed, and the tension faded. Trey, these are the girls. This is May, this is Rhonda, and that's Gina. As I mentioned at lunch, we are the Cracked Hearts Club. Girls, this is Trey Morrison. We dated a little, but it didn't work out, and now he's more like a friend. She emphasized the word friend, stretching it out for effect. May noticed Trey's eyes narrow a little when Deanna said that and made a mental note of it. Trey tilted his head and said, Hello, everyone. Then he looked at Deanna and asked, So, you really think these ladies will help you get your husband back? How did you all meet? Deanna bit her lip, looking a bit embarrassed. I found them online. Trey looked surprised. Really? Sure, why not? I was in therapy and my therapist suggested finding a support group. I thought about joining a book club but saw an ad that said, We help people in tough situations. I sent an email, and a year ago I joined the group. We help each other out, share advice, that kind of thing, and we drink a lot of coffee. Every woman here has faced challenges in their marriage, so we understand each other. And these women will help you? Yes, they know my story. Well, everyone knows it. Ryan made sure of that. They're all willing to support me to be my backup, I guess. And I'm here for... You're here to offer the male perspective. Let me get you a coffee and then I'll explain everything. Deanna moved to the small kitchen in her apartment near Roselle Road in Schaumburg. If she stood on tiptoe, she could see the medieval Times Theater castle across the highway from her place. When she returned, Trey was sitting on the arm of her couch talking to the group. And that's my job. It's not very exciting, but everyone needs insurance. Cheers to that, said Rhonda, lifting her coffee cup. Here you go, Trey, Deanna said, handing him a cup. White with no sugar, right? Trey smiled and nodded. Now that we're all here, we can start, Deanna said, settling into the couch. I'll summarize for Trey's benefit. He knows the basics, what happened, what I did, and what Ryan did. We've met a few times, so he's familiar with most of this. What he doesn't know is what I plan to do next. Deanna took a deep breath and began. I've been working on a plan to win Ryan back. I was waiting until my therapist said I was ready, but I've had this in my mind all along. So here it is. I'm going to do several things to show Ryan that I need him and that he and the kids need me too. Each of the women here has a suggestion, and I plan to take them all. We're going to approach Ryan from every angle. Trey listened carefully. After a moment, he asked, Will he realize this is a planned effort? Deanna looked at the other women for support. I hadn't really thought about that. I'm not sure. Trey jumped in. If he finds out this is not genuine, it could ruin everything. You've already broken his trust and now you need to rebuild it. If he senses that you're hiding something, it could all fall apart. Honesty is the best way forward. It doesn't mean he will run away. It just means he'll see that this is a thoughtful plan. That makes sense, Deanna, Gina added. Now that Trey mentioned it, we should have figured this out earlier. You know him well. Deanna's expression changed for a moment. Then she smiled playfully. I have a secret weapon. I can be open about this. For my first step, why don't you all share with Trey what we decided? Gina smiled and started. Each of us suggested something Deanna needs to do. For me, it's simple. She should share her journals with Ryan. Trey looked at Deanna and then at Gina with curiosity. Usually, when someone goes to therapy, a therapist encourages them to keep a journal. It helps clarify thoughts and track progress in understanding oneself and one's actions. You're encouraged to read them again after some time. It's very personal. You write about your feelings and your thoughts. I believe sharing that with Ryan will help him see the work Deanna has done to understand herself and her feelings. It will give him a clearer view of why she's so determined to get him back. Plus, Gina continued, it sets the stage for their next meetings. Instead of Deanna urging him to meet, he'll be the one wanting to talk. He will have questions based on what he reads if he reads it, and that will start the conversation, instead of Deanna trying to explain herself again. Trey nodded, showing a thoughtful look as if he understood something new. I understand. What's the next step? May? Deanna asked. May moved in her seat and replied, Well, family means a lot to me. I think family is everything. I told Deanna she needs to get Ryan to spend a weekend with the kids. They should pretend to be a family again like nothing happened. Just a weekend together, doing family things, having dinner, going to the zoo, and watching movies, like a normal family would. This is a big request, but if done well, it could remind him of what he has lost. Rhonda? Deanna asked. Rhonda smiled. I think my job is in bringing excitement back. Deanna needs to give Ryan a special night or weekend, something unique that shows she wants to do something special for him. We plan to send them to Vegas, where Deanna can put on a fun show for him, making the weekend unforgettable. Sorry if that sounds blunt, but it's what I mean. Relationships need closeness, and she needs to help him forget the past and create new happy memories. Trey shook his head. They will need to be really amazing to change what he remembers. Honestly, I don't see how that will work, but stranger things have happened. What about me? Do I have a job to do besides just being here? Trey asked, feeling a bit left out. We need to help Ryan with his new business. We know, and we won't go into details, that he has started a company and is working on a mobile phone game. This is a big risk for him, so we need to support him. First, we're going to manage public relations for the company without them knowing. Second, I'm going to help Ryan for a few weeks. I'm taking a break from my other work to be his office help. I'll be his receptionist, HR, office manager, everything to get him back on track. The goal is to show him what a true partner can do beyond just family. He remembers how it used to be, but he needs a reminder. I could really use some help with this, as I've not worked in an office for years, and to be honest, I didn't pay much attention when I did. Do you think you could help us with this? Everyone fell silent and looked at Trey with hope. Well, this all sounds interesting, Trey said, still processing the information. I can probably help. Is that everything? No, there is one more task I have in mind, but I need to keep it secret for now. I'm not sure if I can pull it off, and I don't want to ruin anything. So, based on what you've heard, what do you think? What advice can you offer us? The women continued to watch Trey expectantly, waiting for his response. Okay, I can only share my broad thoughts. I don't know him or his backstory, so I'm speaking as a guy in general. That said, a few things come to mind. Starting with the journals. That's a good idea, but be sure to prepare him for what he might read about you. It could be really tough for him to spend time reading, only to find out that you really disliked something about him. If there are things that might upset him, he should be aware of that beforehand. The women nodded in agreement. Good point, Gina added. By the way, how do you know he's not out there meeting new people? That could complicate your plans. Nope, he's single and not dating. My sources are trustworthy on that, Deanna quickly responded. Trey raised an eyebrow at her. We share kids, and my daughter notices everything. If he were dating, she would definitely tell me. She just can't keep secrets. Trey nodded, understanding her point. You'll need to give him time to read the journals and think about them. He'll probably come back with questions. It might take him a while to sit down and go through them. I know I would need to be in the right mindset. The group nodded again, agreeing with him. See, girls? I told you he was our secret weapon, Deanna exclaimed with excitement. Trey took a sip of the coffee, trying not to show his reaction. Rhonda noticed and struggled to hold back a smile. She exchanged glances with Gina, who understood. Deanna's coffee was notoriously bad. They had suggested getting someone to bring better coffee, but Deanna insisted on being the perfect host. Now Trey had joined the unfortunate group that endured her uniquely terrible coffee. He gently put the cup down, pondering how to avoid more of it. As for the family aspect, I think it could work, but it might be a bit difficult. It's just not going to be the same. I understand your point, but I think it would take all weekend just to get him relaxed enough to actually enjoy the time, if he gets there at all. Given the plan you have, I'm not sure how to improve on what you've already suggested. Maybe make it a 3-day weekend? That could give you more time. Oh wait, maybe what you need is a special event, something that only a family can do together. How about Thanksgiving? Focus on the family part. The intimate part, well, like I said, good idea, but hard to make work. You need to make sure he's feeling confident because if he struggles, which is quite likely, then the whole plan could fail. If he can't get past the things on his mind, he won't succeed, and if he doesn't, everything is off. You simply cannot let him fail. Thinking about it more, are you really aware of the impact Deanna had? I mean, I'm sure you've sought help, and the therapist has guided you, but all of you were part of it. And you aren't male. You don't really understand how he feels and what he's trying to get through. He'll be feeling vulnerable, frustrated, and angry with you at odd moments. He's trying to recover from a hit to his pride that you might not fully get. If you mentioned something hurtful about him compared to others, there's nothing he can do about it, and you can't ignore it or pretend it isn't affecting him. What you need to do in that area is show him that he truly matters to you, and it has to be genuine. If you pretend and it's not sincere, it will not work, and you need to show him that his efforts mean a lot to you, that only he can offer what you need, that it's the best, and no one else can match that. You can only create that feeling through love. He may not be the best partner, but you must make him believe he is perfect for you, without pretending or using any tricks. That's before even getting him to feel comfortable sharing that space with you. Remember, he might see you differently because of past experiences, but if you haven't been with anyone else, and you state that clearly, it can help him feel more secure. Trey looked expectantly at Deanna, who met his gaze and replied, "I'm surprised you need to ask." Trey kept looking steadily at her and finally said, "Well, you did stray from him." Deanna pulled back while May stood up. "That was unnecessary," she said sharply. "You don't think he's going to feel that way? That he won't think those thoughts? And worse?" Trey challenged May. Deanna regained her composure and looked back at Trey, her eyes fierce. "No, I haven't strayed. I tried dating a bit like you, but it didn't work. I had a few guys in my bed, but I decided to ask them to leave before it went too far when I realized their intentions." Deanna was upset and confronted me. Trey tightly closed his lips and asked, "Is that how you'll respond when Ryan says things like that?" A quiet moment followed as everyone processed Trey's words. He relaxed his posture, trying to seem friendly, while Deanna began to understand the challenge she had taken on. Deanna turned away and softly said, "Sorry, Trey." In the gentlest way he could, Trey replied, "Look, Deanna, your plan seems good and well thought out. You've been working on this for months, but I don't think it will go as smoothly as you hope. It's a big task. Still, if you're determined, I will help. Just know my help may come in unexpected ways. You seem very focused, but I don't think you fully grasp the situation. I'm here for you. I still have doubts, but I'm in." "Why don't you think it will work?" Rhonda asked boldly. "There are so many factors to consider. What you did and how he reacted. You must be really upset to pull a stunt like that. Plus, there was a long time since you were close. He could have moved on. He might not want to be reminded of the past. There are many possible problems." Trey thought for a moment, and then absent-mindedly took a sip of coffee, immediately wishing he hadn't. Still, his strong reaction to your actions suggests there are strong feelings involved. He must have loved you to respond that way, he added, considering. The room was quiet for a bit. Then Rhonda laughed and said, "Where were you when I needed advice?" Everyone smiled. Deanna got up, walked over to Trey, and hugged him. With tears in her eyes, she said, "Just from what I've heard from you in the last few minutes, I believe we can't do this without your help. You might be the key to making this work. Thank you, Trey. You're a good person." Trey looked a bit awkward and smiled back at her. Deanna stood up. "All right, ladies, let's get to work. We have plans to make. Who wants more coffee?" A week later, I received a text from Deanna saying, "Can we meet for dinner? I need to talk to you." I stared at the message for nearly an hour while out with Simon, who was busy trying out new recipes. Somehow he convinced the bar we were in, with its walls full of TVs, to switch over to Top Chef. I felt embarrassed because he was enjoying it, completely unaware of the sports fans staring at us. I, on the other hand, noticed their looks. I gave a small shrug or glanced away. I kept going back to the message. What did it mean? What was she trying to say that we hadn't already discussed? Was something wrong with the kids? Maybe she met someone new or was moving away. Perhaps she got some bad news, or even good news like winning the lottery. I wondered if she'd share any of the money if she did. There I went again, letting my imagination take over. Maybe I should do something about that one day. I pictured myself in a nice car, like a Jaguar. I wondered what those really cost. I was off in my thoughts again. Have I mentioned I do that often? Eventually, I realized I could simply ask her what she meant. So, I replied, "Okay, concerning?" She texted back, "Us," which relieved me of worries about the kids, health issues, or money, but brought up other concerns instead. I had a feeling this would be interesting, at least, if I could stay calm. I showed Simon and asked, "What do you think?" He read the messages, glanced at me, and took a big sip of his beer. That made me curious. What is a quaff, anyway? Is it different from just gulping it down? Can you quaff other drinks? I wondered how much of a drink counted as a quaff. There I was, distracting myself again. I really should work on that. Simon set his beer down and asked, "What are you going to do?" I looked at him. "I was hoping you would tell me." "Well," he said, "Polly thinks you should stay away from her. Don't let that troublemaker get back into your life," were her words, I believe. Polly was Simon's wonderful wife. She was small but full of energy, and she had accepted living with a man who sometimes acted like a child. Still, she loved him, which he was lucky to have. She cared deeply for him, and it showed. Our friendship was solid. I joked with her, and she teased me back, and everything flowed well. She never hesitated to say what she thought. She gave her opinions freely. You either accepted what she said or you didn't. I always did, which made things easier. I left their place in one piece, and that was always good. "Yeah," I said, thinking it over. "The problem is, she is the mother of my kids. It's easy to say to stay away, but it's harder to actually do. Still, I believe I can manage this. It's been almost 2 years now." Simon nodded, looking thoughtful for a moment. I could see he wanted to say more, but chose not to. Instead, he just said, "Yeah, you need to go." Then someone did something interesting with a snack, and he went back to watching the cooking show. Instead of texting, I decided to take a chance. I stood up and stepped outside the bar. Thankfully, it wasn't raining. This is Chicago, after all. I called her. "Hello, Ryan," she said. "I didn't expect your call." I could hear a TV in the background. It sounded like an episode of The Big Bang Theory. Sheldon was explaining the rules to Rock, Paper, Scissors, Lizard, Spock. "I might as well call. It takes too long to text back and forth. What do you need, Deanna?" "I want to have dinner with you," she said plainly. I should have understood what she meant from that alone. "Is something happening? Do we need to talk?" I asked, curious. "Sort of. It's easier to talk face-to-face. The phone feels too distant. Can we meet?" "Sure. How about Thursday? Paula can watch the kids that night. Out back in Schaumburg? I can come to you." "That sounds good. How about 7? "Yeah, that works." There was a quiet moment. We both seemed to run out of things to say. Finally, I spoke up. "Okay, I'll see you then," I said before hanging up. I put my phone away. I had learned my lesson about leaving it out. Just recently, I had left my phone unlocked, and while I was in the bathroom, someone posted my number online with an invitation to text me any funny sentence they could think of. When those messages popped up in a meeting, it was really embarrassing. Simon always asked, with a straight face, if I'd received any new funny messages. I would have to get him back someday. I walked inside, wondering what was so important. She was probably going to talk about getting married or something similar. I was mistaken, though. Well, not about her wanting to get married, just about who it was with. Thursday came, as it always does. I had a meeting that day in Des Plaines with an artist we were considering. Deke, Kevin, and I were trying to figure out if he was good enough to be our art director, the person who would create the style for the game, whether it was cartoonish, serious, or something different. I had learned a lot recently, and now I understood what 8-bit meant when people talked about graphics and music. I brought the guys with me because they were better at judging talent than I was. They seemed happy with his skills, but still wanted to see more artists' work before making a final choice. I knew I had to push for a decision soon because time was passing, and it felt like we were wasting it. After we finished, they returned to the office, and I made my way to Schaumburg, to the Outback on Gulf Road. The traffic was terrible, but I managed to arrive with just 10 minutes to spare. Thankfully, I had called ahead for a table, so when Deanna arrived, I was already seated. She looked nice. I could see she had put in some effort. Her hair was neat and her makeup looked good. I even noticed her engagement ring was on her other hand, which was a bit surprising. I started to wonder what this meeting was really about. After she sat down, we exchanged the usual polite comments about how we looked and how things were going. I wasn't sure how much she knew about my life now. She was aware we had moved, especially since she picked up the kids. I thought she might have heard about my new job through Paula or Saffron. Jamie was really excited about it all. He loved video games and was eager to be a part of the game we were working on. Someone must have mentioned it. I chose not to tell the kids not to talk about me to their mom because I knew they would anyway, and I didn't want to put that pressure on them. Our waitress came over and we ordered drinks and dinner. Then we sat in silence, looking at each other. It seemed like Deanna was trying to read my expression, what for, I couldn't tell. I met her gaze, and then she shook her head, smiled, and said, "Yes, we need to talk. I have a lot to say. Can I ask that you let me finish? I have a lot on my mind, and if you interrupt, I won't be able to get it all out." I was a bit surprised, but I thought, why not? I had nothing to lose. "Sure. I promise I won't say anything until you're finished. I've had practice with that." As soon as I said it, I realized it might not have been the best choice of words. Deanna frowned for a moment before smiling weakly and replied, "I guess I deserve that." "I'm sorry," I quickly added. "That was out of line. I'll do better. Just know I'm coming from a tough place. Please go ahead." She nodded, refocusing on what she needed to say. "Okay, remember I told you I wouldn't let you go? That I'd find a way back into your life?" I nodded. There wasn't much else to respond with. "Well, I know you haven't heard from me lately. I've been in therapy with Jim Vonnie. I know you've seen him a few times too." I nodded again. I had nothing more to say. "It's been a long journey for me to understand myself. I don't think I fully understand everything yet, but I've made some progress. I think I know what happened now. No, that's not the point of our conversation." I noticed her fidget a bit. I honestly didn't want to talk about things like that right now. It caught me off guard. "That's for another time. Today, I want to let you know that I'm ready. I'm finally in a place to try to reconnect with you." There was a brief pause as I took that in. The waitress arrived with our drinks and appetizers. We started eating and I noticed how nervous Deanna seemed. She hid it well, but after living together for 15 years I could tell. She took small bites but chewed quickly, as if she wanted to finish fast. "What, Ma?" I started to say, but Deanna quickly raised her hand and said, "Nope." I gave a small smile. She used to do that when we were married. If I tried to speak, she would interrupt with a firm no. For the first time in months, I felt a mix of nostalgia and longing for the past. That was new. She pushed away her shrimp and smiled at me. "Where were we? Oh, right. You and me again. I told you I would come back, and I am. I want you to know that. There are other things I need to say. I don't know if I've apologized to you properly. From the bottom of my heart, I'm truly sorry for how I treated you. You didn't deserve it at all. I regret causing you pain and the untrue thoughts you must have had about yourself because of me. She paused to take a drink, finishing her beer while avoiding my gaze. Once she seemed steadier, she said, "I haven't asked you for forgiveness. You might have noticed that. It's not that I don't want it or feel I need it. It's because I don't believe I deserve it. What I did was wrong, and you shouldn't forgive me easily. I need to make up for it in more ways than just saying sorry. But what I do need is a chance." I blinked at that, ready to respond when her hand went up again. I looked at it and chose to stay silent. "Look, I know I ruined any trust you had in me. I understand that trust is hard to build and easy to break. Without a chance to rebuild, I feel lost. I need the chance to show you that I'm worth the risk of restoring our trust. I know you don't have to give it to me, but I have to ask." "Wait," she said as I took a breath. I really needed to keep my promise. "I've been thinking a lot about this, and I want to address your point about how I can make things right. My first thought is to just ask you what you want me to do. But that wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be right to put all the responsibility on you. Your question is what got me thinking. I need to come up with ways to show you that I deserve another chance. This is on me. I made this happen, and I understand that." She paused for a breath and looked at me closely to see my reaction. Whatever she saw must have pushed her to continue. "Now, there's more. I've been meeting with some friends who have gone through similar situations. We've been helping each other and sharing ideas. I have a plan. I want to do something, and I need your permission and your help whether you are ready for this or not to show you that I deserve another chance. I'm not asking you to just agree without thinking. I want to do things that will show you why we should build our lives back together. It will only take a few weekends, and I promise you won't regret it." She rushed through her last words and then sat there, still, looking at me with a strong hope, searching my face for my thoughts. I sat there, surprised. Then our meals arrived. I ate mine without really tasting it. I'm sure it was good, but I can't remember it. Among all she could have said, I didn't expect this. I felt unsure how to respond. I didn't have strong feelings at that moment. Confused, I put my fork down and said, "Let me restate what you said so I can be sure I got it right." It's a common way to confirm understanding. She nodded while chewing her food. "You want me to put aside my feelings about what happened and give you several weekends to, make up for it? Show me how much you care? Try to bring back what we had?" "No, that's not quite it. It would be nice if that happened, but I think we know it's not that simple. What I want is to convince you that I'm worth the risk. Do you remember how it was when we first started dating?" she said, suddenly changing the topic. I nodded, trying to keep up. "You remember how hard you worked to get me to go out with you? After that crazy night at the Crow Bar when we met? I made it clear that dating wouldn't happen. Well, you were with that difficult bartender at the time. The person you were answering calls for was talking to women at the bar. I really don't understand why you stayed," I said. "I never got that, but it is what it is." "It doesn't matter why I was there, Ryan. What matters is that you were persistent. You kept asking me out, sending me flowers, and didn't give up until I agreed. You made sure I saw you were worth it. That's what I'm trying to do now. Imagine we don't know each other. Imagine I'm interested in you and want to show you why we could be good together." "That sounds easy to say, but it's been 15 years, Deanna. What happened? I just don't get it." She sighed and replied, "Ryan, I'm doing my best. I'm reaching for anything here. Work with me." I took another bite of my steak, deep in thought. Did I really want to do this? What did I feel for Deanna now? I thought I knew, but this evening was confusing. I tried to think clearly, but food distracted me. So, as usual, I hesitated. I finished my meal and looked at Deanna. She hadn't touched her food and was staring at me, waiting. "Come on, Ryan. Help me out here. Be a little easy on me," she said. I wiped my hands and face with the napkin, trying to calm down. Silly, I know. I tossed the napkin aside and said, "That's a lot to throw at me, Deanna. To be honest, I'm not sure what I think yet. I won't say yes, but I won't say no either. Let me think about it, and I promise I'll get back to you, all right?" She bit her lip, clearly hoping for a yes right then, but at least it wasn't a no. "I guess that's something to work with?" She seemed let down. "You realize this is a big step for me, right? Reaching out like this? I know you could just say no, but I've worked hard to get here, and I want you to understand why. I really need you. You are my partner, my friend, my everything. I can't let that go. I just can't. I need you in my life." I looked at her and could tell she was hoping I would say something encouraging. I took a deep breath and said, "I understand, but you have to see things from my side. I didn't do anything wrong, but I feel the effects every single day." I hadn't meant to sound harsh, but it slipped out. She turned her eyes away. "Deanna, I honestly don't know what I feel right now. I came, I listened, but please don't push me. I need time to think." For some reason, I reached out and took her hand gently. "I know this must be hard for you. I've been in a very lonely place, and I'm just starting to deal with it. The kids are great, but you know how hard it is when holidays come around. We aren't a complete family, and I know it's tough for you too, so I'm sure you understand what I mean. I need to think about how things would be if I agreed. And let's hope it goes well. It's a big decision, and you know that. But I'm not ignoring it completely, okay? Just take that for now." Deanna looked back at me and held my hand. I noticed a tear in her eye. In that moment, I realized that apart from the kids, this was the first time a woman had held my hand in over 3 months. It felt nice. Wow. So with all that in my mind, the next 2 days were hard for me to focus. I talked to people, even Paula. She was in the know and had figured everything out. The news about her mother was everywhere online. Saffron and Jamie didn't know as much, but it was nice to chat with Paula. I shared the text from Deanna and told her about our meeting. So what do you think, wise 15-year-old? Paula jumped in and said, You have to give her a chance. Let's be honest, Dad, you won't find anyone better and you're not getting any younger. Plus, I definitely want my parents back, mainly so I won't have to share the bed with Mom when we stay at the apartment. Remember the last time? I had to sleep on the couch just to escape her snoring. I laughed. I had put up with that for years. Hearing Paula talk about it made me chuckle. You're right about all that. So if I decided to pursue this, not saying I will, but if I did, you'd be okay with it? You might have to watch the kids sometimes. She rolled her eyes like teenagers do. Sure, Dad. Not like I don't already. But we need to discuss my payment. My friends get $5 an hour for babysitting. How about this, Paula? You don't charge me, and I won't make you stay at your mom's. Sound fair? She laughed, getting up from the couch and grabbing the kid's iPad. One day I won't be around, Dad. You need to make the most of my time here while you still can. Cheeky girl. I really loved her. 2 days later, I had a meeting at the bar. I'd done that many times in the past couple of years. We had our favorite booth where no one could overhear us. There was me, Simon, Jonathan Brody, and surprisingly, Solomon, who happened to be in town. I didn't know he was back until he called me. He arrived late, accompanied by a young girl in school uniform, who couldn't have been more than 16, although he assured us she was. Her hair had red streaks and was styled in tight curls. She had at least 3 piercings I could see, and her short skirt caught attention. Solomon spotted us at the table and walked her over, greeted her, then playfully gave her a nudge. He said, Go enjoy the movie. I'll call you when it's time to come back. She smiled shyly and left the bar, knowing many eyes were on her. Solomon slid Simon down the booth and settled in. I nodded toward the girl as she left and said, Really, Solomon? He chuckled and responded with his usual bluntness. Oh, she's cute. And you know how adventurous she can be. Simon turned away, rolling his eyes and muttering, Oh, man. Jonathan laughed. I forgot to warn him about Solomon's way of speaking. I sighed. Solomon, I said, too much information. Solomon looked back at me and said, Come on, old dude, you're just jealous. So what's going on? Do you have someone else for us to deal with? Solomon asked while checking the beer list. I heard from Deanna. She wants another chance. Really? Are you thinking about giving her one? Or maybe more? Solomon teased. Simon turned to him, giving a soft warning. Dude, come on, you all need to lighten up, he replied. I wanted to shift the conversation back to what was important. Look, I want to hear what you think. Here's the situation. She knows trust takes time to rebuild and that she needs to earn my trust back. She's suggesting she'll do things for me to show she deserves another chance. What kind of things? Jonathan asked. I'm not sure. She didn't give me any details. Said Simon. I'm not sure this is a good idea, Ryan. I remember how upset you were after that situation. Why would you want to go through that again? You've moved forward. Don't go back to that place. I met his gaze. He had a point. Jonathan spoke next, in his usual straightforward manner. I don't know what to suggest, Ryan. On one hand, it seems risky to open yourself up to more hurt. But on the other hand, if she truly regrets her actions, showing kindness makes you stronger. Sometimes what you know is safer than the unknown. He shrugged and added, I see both sides, and I'm here for you, no matter what you decide. You're my friend. I nodded to show I appreciated his support. Solomon leaned back, taking a long sip of his beer. Dude, are you having any luck in your love life? He asked directly. I was surprised and frowned at him. What do you mean by that? Yeah, I figured as much, he cut in. Look, what do you have to lose? You don't need to get too serious, just go out and have some fun. If it works out, that's great. If not, you've at least enjoyed yourself. You've faced this before, so you have some practice. I say give it a try. Just wait to see where she wants to go with it. That was a different way to think about it. I didn't speak much for the rest of the night. I just drank more and more as the beers kept coming. The guys tried to keep the mood light and stayed off the topic of Deanna. Solomon kept us entertained with stories about his girlfriend, Tiffany, and we all felt a bit sorry for her and for him sharing those details. We asked him for more stories, wanting to know everything. I knew we would struggle to look her in the eye when she came to pick him up. By 11, I was pretty buzzed, and I suddenly decided to text Deanna. I didn't want to call. She'd realize I was tipsy, just like I knew she would be nervous. I didn't want her to think my message was just a drunken impulse, even though it kind of was. Reflecting on it, I realized I might have been leaning this way for a while. My text said, "Okay, I will do this. What happens next?" I received a quick reply, "You have no idea how happy you just made me. Dinner, tomorrow, my place, 7." I replied with "okay," and that was it. The decision was made. I just hoped my hangover wouldn't be too bad. I realized I was stepping into a situation where past feelings and unresolved issues could come back. But if I was honest, I hadn't really moved on in my life. I had tried, but hadn't succeeded, and if this was what I needed to resolve some of that in any direction, then so be it. I arrived early. I knew where she lived. I had picked up the kids a couple of times, but I had never been inside. The apartment complex was nice and well kept. Deanna seemed to be doing well. I knew she worked in planning events. Sometimes she would need me to watch the kids for a weekend because she was busy with a conference. I also knew she had a blog about interior design. I didn't know if it was popular, but I read it from time to time out of curiosity. I wasn't really into decorating, so I wouldn't know the difference between a throw pillow and a regular pillow. I suspected that most people didn't either, and it was more about appearance than anything else. So there I was, with a bottle in hand. I was curious about what would happen next. What I ended up doing was not much. Well, that's 2 words, but you get the idea. I knocked on the door and she opened it, looking fantastic once again. I stepped inside, chuckling a bit as I handed her the bottle. Deanna asked, "What's so funny?" I felt I should be honest. "Oh, just this situation. This place, you." She looked a little surprised. "What do you mean?" "Well, just look at you. You look amazing, you smell nice, and dinner smells wonderful. If we got back together, you know it wouldn't stay this way for long." Luckily, she understood my point and said, "Yeah, I guess I went all out a little. Want me to change into something simpler?" She was talking about the night we first met at a club in Chicago. It was Halloween, and she had dressed up in a cool outfit while I was in a Roman gladiator costume. I couldn't help but laugh at that memory, and she looked at me, puzzled. I replied, "Yes, you could still pull that off, but me as a gladiator now? No one wants to see that." She smiled softly and went into the kitchen to open the bottle. Dinner was something I really liked. Deanna's chicken pot pie was out of this world. As I ate, I remembered how much I had missed this time together. We talked about the kids and our jobs. I explained what I was doing with my new video game projects and how I met the people I was working with. I sensed she was worried about the risks I was taking, but she stayed supportive. Then she shared what she was up to, talking about how she started helping organize some events at a car show. She had been living beside one of the models and got invited to the show. While there, she saw that one of the organizers hadn't arrived, so she stepped in to help the models get where they needed to go. The company running the show was impressed with her willingness to help. They offered her a part-time job planning different events. Even though their main office was downtown, she could work from home, getting paid well for her efforts. She mentioned that her job would require her to be at some events to assist speakers and handle hotel matters. She rolled her eyes about how demanding some people could be and admitted that some of the conference topics were incredibly boring. She once sat through a geology conference that nearly put her to sleep, but she was happy. She found her work interesting, and it was part-time some of the time, full-time when a conference was coming up. She earned enough money and met many different people. I wondered why she wasn't approached more often at those events. I knew how people acted away from home at conferences, and there she was looking nice, being efficient, and importantly, single. Then I thought, why do I care? I realized that I still did care, not in an angry way, but in a way that still mattered to me. I guessed I would spend some time thinking about my feelings after the night was over. We talked about everything except why I was really there. Once we were finished, I pushed my chair back and let out a little noise, and she rolled her eyes at me. "Are you finished? Because you really looked like you were enjoying the food there." "Hey, you invited me," I replied, pretending to be annoyed. "If you didn't want me to enjoy the food, why cook it?" "Right. I think we should start that conversation," she said. "Don't worry, it's not scary or anything. Well, it is for me. You have nothing to worry about." I sat there, unsure of what to say. "Okay, so if you are ready, here's how it works. I have several things to do for you. The first one is tonight. I shifted a bit in the chair, feeling uneasy. I could sense where this was heading. No, nothing like that. Still thinking too much, I see, she said with a smile. Let me tell you about the first task. It's to share my journals. Since what happened and when I first met Jim, I've been keeping a journal. Just a few sentences each day about my thoughts and feelings. It's meant to be a record of my journey to understand myself better. Sounds a bit over the top, doesn't it? I smiled and nodded. A little. Yeah, I thought so too, but it helps me to write things down, even though it's hard to keep up every night. Anyway, I've tried my best. There's a lot in there. Some days I felt a lot to say. Ryan, I want you to read them. There was a short pause. I didn't really understand why she wanted this. Just as I was about to ask, it must have shown on my face because Deanna said, "Why?" Because it will show you where I've been for the past 18 months. What I've been doing, why, my feelings, all of it. It's the best way for me to share how I've been trying to rebuild my life and my self-respect again. I think it might help you understand, and it will probably bring up questions which we can use to start more conversations. I could see her point. She got up and went to another room, then returned with 3 notebooks and handed them to me. I opened one of the notebooks and saw her neat handwriting inside. I looked up and asked, "You didn't type it up?" She shrugged and replied, "I didn't have a laptop back then. Writing something out makes it feel more real." I glanced at the books again and she said, "Some of what's in there might upset you, Ryan. I didn't mean to be harsh, but at first I had a lot of anger because of how things ended between us. I think you can see why. It took me a while to accept my role in everything. I knew what I did, but I wasn't ready to fully face it. There's some frustration in there that you might not like. Please understand it shows how much I've changed." I set the book down with the others and said calmly, "Okay, I understand. I need to read this. And then? Well, you can expect to see a lot more of me. I want to meet at least twice a week. We'll have a lot to talk about based on those notebooks," she said, pointing to them. "And after we finish, we'll spend a weekend together, where I'll be around a lot. I won't go into too many details right now, just when it's time to discuss it. For now, your homework is to read." I raised my eyebrows and nodded. This wasn't what I expected for the evening, but that was all right. The idea of being close with Deanna made me a bit nervous, to be honest. But that was fine, although I felt a little let down that she didn't seem eager for it. It was all rather confusing. The rest of the evening went well. She had made a pavlova, a Russian dessert, knowing it was one of my favorites. She really went all out, and it was delicious. I even had 2 servings. So what? If I was going to be called greedy, I might as well enjoy it, right? I said goodnight at 10 p.m., gathered up the notebooks, placed my hand on her arm, and kissed her on the cheek. I felt her tremble as I did, which made me think she was more nervous than I was, and that secretly pleased me. Over the next 4 nights, I read her journals. I hadn't planned on reading them so soon. I meant to set them aside for a bit to sort out my feelings first. I had things to do with the kids. Jamie was now in 1st grade and struggling with adding tens and hundreds together, so we pulled out some M&Ms for that evening's lesson. Saffron was working on a report about King Tut, and Paula was figuring out what science fair project she wanted to do. I kept suggesting she do a survey on how many people enjoyed science fair projects and ask her class, but she just stared at me with calm eyes like her mom's and then returned to the iPad, where she was looking for ideas on Pinterest. That night, after they were tucked in bed, I poured myself a glass of whiskey, took out the books, settled back on the couch, and began to read. Deanna was right. I didn't really like some of the early things she wrote. There was a lot of anger in those first entries. She was upset with me, with the guy she was with her friend Crystal, and even with herself. She was angry about my actions, the choices that led her to be in that situation, her life now without the kids, and her money troubles. It felt like she was unhappy about everything. I was hurt by some of the excuses she used for her actions. I could see she was putting the blame on me for things that had gone wrong in her life, but it still affected me. It was painful. Melissa, her sister, was especially tough on her. Part of me was surprised since she was Deanna's sister, but part of me wasn't, because Melissa was tough on everyone. Learning that Melissa had been hurt in the past made me understand her attitude a bit more. Deanna's feelings weren't surprising, but they still stung to read. However, after a few entries, things started to calm down. The journals shared her life and emotions. Her life was tough. Living with her sister, losing her job, friends distancing themselves, not being able to see the kids, and struggling financially. Yes, it was difficult. I didn't have much sympathy, though. She had a part in creating her problems. I felt conflicted. On one hand, I remembered her as my wife of over 15 years, and I felt for her. On the other hand, the part of me that felt betrayed just shrugged and thought, well, don't make those choices then. About a month later, she got a job at a retail store. It wasn't perfect, but it helped her get by. She found a small apartment and moved out from her sister's place. The tone of her entries began to shift. She started to reflect on her actions. I could see the therapy helping as her anger seemed to lessen, and she started to really think about what she had done and why she had done it. The first thing I noticed was her understanding of the effects of her choices on her life and mine. She didn't fully grasp the reasons behind her actions yet, but she was starting to explore the impacts. There were several entries about her dating experiences and her feelings about them. She seemed to be doing this because she felt a chance had opened up for her. She had already faced the consequences of her earlier choices, so she wanted to see what else was out there. See if she could find someone else for me. From her messages, it seemed like her attempts to move on hadn't gone any better than mine. This was somewhat comforting, even if I didn't understand why I felt that way. In the end, I just shrugged it off. No one likes the thought of someone else taking their place. That was my way of thinking, and I was set on it. Then she began to understand what she had done. She started to realize the effects of her actions and her part in it all. While this was a positive step, the truth hit her hard, or at least that's how it sounded in her writing. She had seen her friend Crystal Riggs again. Crystal had been unfaithful to her husband, Charlie. I had caught her and used that to learn about what Deanna was doing. I had warned Crystal to stop her actions, which made Deanna very upset because she believed Crystal faced little consequence compared to her. Looking back, Deanna might have had a point. I had forced Crystal to be kind to her husband, while Deanna ended up getting a divorce. There was a lot of unfairness in that. Slowly, she started to pick herself up. She spoke about not blaming me for how I reacted. It became more interesting as she began to think about my feelings. She wondered where I was, what I was doing, and who I was with. She even thought about whether I blamed myself. That's when she decided to make and send me a video of her speaking to a therapist. She felt very sad that she couldn't talk to me directly. She understood why, but wanted to ease my worries as much as she could. She wanted to clear it up that I wasn't to blame for what happened. It was all on her. Once she sent that, her tone became more peaceful. She shared about going to a car show and the new chance she had embraced. She mentioned creating a blog since she had been an interior designer before. Even if she wasn't working in that field now, she was still talking about it. She shared details about her life and her wish to be back with me, along with thoughts on how to make that happen. Then came the divorce papers. That was a tough day for her, or perhaps a tough week. It had been hard for me too. I remember sitting at the bar with Simon, Polly, and Jonathan, just trying to forget everything. There are no comforting words for days like that. I don't even recall how I got home, but I certainly remembered the hangover. Deanna had spent that night watching a movie and had 2 bottles of wine for company. It hadn't been easy for her either. Over time, she started to refresh her spirit. The plans for us to reunite became her main focus. She met a group of women on Craigslist, all of whom had been in similar situations as Deanna, at least when it came to being unfaithful, and they were there to help her. I appreciated that at least. But then I stopped to think about it, and I didn't really want to dwell on those thoughts too much. When I finished reading the journals 4 days later, I felt confused. There was nothing shocking in Deanna's writings. It was what I expected if I had thought about her actions at all. I couldn't figure out my feelings after reading them. They showed that she was sincerely regretful and reflecting on what she had done. I had questions. You can't read something like that without having questions. However, there were no sudden realizations that changed how I saw what happened or how I felt about her. I began to wonder what she hoped I would feel after reading these. I wasn't ready to forgive or forget. I still remembered the painful moments I had experienced and the video that caused me so much grief. That pain hadn't gone away, and she probably understood that. So I was curious about what might happen after I read the journals that would make me think differently. One interesting part of all this was that there was no clear explanation for why she had initially taken the offer, why she had made that choice. It felt so unlike who I thought she was, and from her journal she seemed to feel the same way. From what I gathered, she went along with it because she could. It wasn't like she was unhappy with her life. She often mentioned how much she loved our life together, with the kids and everything. As far as she could tell, she saw it as a chance to become someone different, to have a new side to her. What she had wasn't lacking. This was just a way to add to who she was. She had also heard from Crystal about how exciting and fun it was to cheat, and how easy it seemed to hide. She never thought I would find out, but she believed that it would help her become a more complete person and give her some excitement. It was a quick decision, made without much thought. The chance was there, and she took it. It didn't reflect her normal life at all. It was just an opportunity for her to explore a different side of herself for a moment. I did wonder about that because it made me think, why do you want to be someone else when you keep saying you love who you are? But that was a question for later, when we could talk in person. Then something risky happened, and she found out something new about herself. That's when everything changed. There was no way she would share that with me. How could you tell your partner that the thrill of being caught makes things more exciting without explaining how you figured that out? This kept her secret going longer than it really should have. I couldn't help but smile at the thought of how long an affair was supposed to last. After reading her writings, I concluded that Deanna felt truly sorry. She realized what she had done, although she didn't fully grasp how much it affected me. But what she did understand really shook her. I saw that she wanted me back so badly, and she had worked hard to figure out how to make that happen. I had questions about some of the things she wrote, and I knew I needed to share my feelings. I wanted her to know how deeply she had hurt me. As I thought about it, tears came to my eyes. I was back in Madison finding out about her unfaithfulness, and it took me a long time to calm myself. I realized she had a tough path ahead to earn back my trust. Deanna asked the hostess if Mr. Morrison had arrived and was led directly to his table. He stood up as she sat down and asked the hostess for some water. Trey returned to his seat and took a sip of his wine. "So, how did it go?" he asked, without wasting any time, as Deanna ordered a soda from the nearby waitress. Deanna smiled at him. "Well, he's on board as much as he can be. We had dinner, I explained my plans, I gave him the journals, he read them, and he texted me to say, okay. I think I might actually have a chance here." Trey forced a smile. "I'm happy for you. What comes next in your plan?" "Well, we're having dinner together twice a week, and in 2 weeks we have a long family weekend planned. I arranged everything. We're going to Minneapolis for the weekend to visit the Mall of America. I'm renting a van and we're driving there together. Spending time in the car together will be good for us." Trey nodded slowly, swirling his wine in the glass and thinking. "I have an idea. Do you, exercise?" Deanna looked at him sideways, a look many women give when asked something they think is too personal. "Well, it's not really your concern, but no," she replied in a bit of a frosty tone. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry," Trey said, putting the wine glass down again. "I had a thought. What if you and Ryan tried a sport together? Something team-based, where you need to work together. If you try something new together, it could help you grow as a team, doing something healthy together." His voice trailed off as Deanna kept staring at him. "What? Great. Idea," she said with excitement. "What should we do? Racquetball?" "I'm not sure enough about Ryan to give suggestions. It's more of a thought than a solid plan, but it could help you spend more time together. It doesn't matter what the sport is, as long as you're starting and growing together." Deanna smiled with enthusiasm. "That's brilliant. Trey, you're so clever." She took a sip of her drink and then asked a bit shyly, "Did you ever do this with your wife?" "I tried. She wasn't really interested." "What sport did you pick?" Trey shifted a bit in his chair, looking at Deanna. "Well, my sport is golf. It's not bad, actually, but what she chose, well, it was—" He looked away and mumbled something. Deanna leaned in and said, "What?" There was a moment of silence while Trey shifted again, avoiding eye contact with Deanna. "Table tennis. There, I said it. It was a complete disaster." Deanna tried not to giggle, but a soft laugh slipped out. "I played table tennis in college," she admitted once she composed herself. I'm sure it went better for you than it did for me with my ex, replied Trey, trying to regain his composure. Deanna smiled at him kindly. I still don't understand why it didn't work between you two. You seem like a great guy. Trey smiled softly and glanced away again. It just wasn't meant to be. What she wanted was different from what I wanted. Let's order lunch, he said, changing the topic and picking up his menu to signal a new direction in their conversation. Deanna observed him for a moment before she also reached for her menu. I watched her, unsure if I had really heard what she just said, and I asked her to repeat it. We were at Giordano's Pizza, sharing a deep dish pie. I have a weakness for their pizza and often order it weekly. The kids don't care much for it, but as I tease them, they wouldn't recognize good pizza even if it was right in front of them. They often point out that I sometimes have it all over my clothes. Forget them. They aren't my kids. I know it. Anyway, this was the first of the dinners that Deanna was eager for us to have. She knew what I liked and picked this place for us to eat, knowing I would say yes just because it was an excuse to enjoy a big meal. What I didn't see coming was that it was a trap. We sat down and talked about our week. She mentioned she was busy with a dentist conference that was boring her to sleep. Then when the pizza arrived, and I expressed how great it smelled, she asked me, out of the blue, if I was exercising at all and if I'd like to try a sport with her. I paused before I picked up my first slice, looked at her and said, Do I look like I'm exercising? Who has the time? What sport are you talking about? She put her utensils down and replied, I just thought it might be nice for us to start a sport together so we'd be at the same level. We could both use some activity. It could be something team-related so we work together. Maybe even help us understand each other better. She smiled, looking proud of her clever idea. As I moved my pizza onto my plate, I realized her choice of restaurant was about getting me to see myself in a negative light, not about my preferences. I began to cut my slice, which was thick like a pie, and casually asked her what sport she had in mind. Her answer made me double-check I heard it right. Table tennis, she said. Surely I must have misheard her. But she repeated it. I was stunned. No, was my sharp reply. No way I'm playing ping pong with you. That's just not happening. Okay, she said calmly, hiding her feelings. What should we do instead? I was caught off guard. She had tricked me into agreeing, and now I needed to think of something. I decided to be a little silly to see how she would react. How about frisbee golf? I've always thought that looked fun, I suggested, expecting her to laugh it off. Deanna smirked and considered it for a moment. I could get behind that, she finally said. This was not going the way I wanted. I didn't actually want to play frisbee golf with her, or anything at all, really. In a last-ditch effort, I asked, Is this one of those bunch of things? She took a big bite of her pizza, chewed, swallowed, and replied thoughtfully, No, it isn't. I was just looking at you and thinking. A friend had mentioned doing something similar with his wife, a way for them to connect. I thought it might work for us, too. A friend? I couldn't help but ask, Which friend? Deanna glanced at me, noticing my slightly difficult attitude. I realized I shouldn't have said anything. It made it clear that I cared, and she noticed. A small smile passed over her face before she leaned in and took my hand. It's all right. He's a male friend who is giving me advice. While I have a group of female friends who help me, I need a guy's perspective too. I want to understand where you're coming from. Honestly, I need to know if my ideas will work and how to make them better. I see. So he helps you for free? I was losing control of the situation, and that made me uneasy. She noticed my tone and frowned at me. Ryan, if I wanted to be with him, I could. You don't own me. That was a mistake, and she realized it as soon as she said it. I pulled my hand away, pushed my plate aside, and stood up. I've lost my appetite, I said, grabbing my jacket. Wait, Ryan, Deanna said, looking concerned. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it that way. Please, don't leave. Stay and finish the pizza. You know it's your favorite. Don't let my thoughtlessness ruin this. I held my coat in hand, debating how I felt. I really wasn't hungry anymore, but she seemed like she wanted to talk. And at least she was being honest, even if I didn't appreciate her words. I sat back down, though I didn't touch the pizza. Fine, I said, not intending to say more. I'm really sorry, she said again. Look, he's just a friend. He's trying to help us connect more. I thought you'd appreciate that. There's nothing else going on. You can meet him if you'd like. I didn't like it, but she was correct. I didn't own her. We had both let go of those rights in our divorce. I just stared at her. Okay, so table tennis is out. Frisbee golf works for me, she said, trying to steer the conversation back to normal. I continued looking at her, thinking about what I should do. What did it matter? She could do what she wanted, and as long as I kept reminding myself of that, I would start to believe it eventually. But she was leading this little journey, not me. I was fine on my own. What this little event showed was that her chances of getting to me were lower than she thought, and I felt secure with my own defenses. I could let her have this moment because it just confirmed that I didn't care, and she still hadn't learned the lessons she needed for us to move ahead. So with that in mind, I had another slice of pizza. Why waste it? And it was tasty. So we decided to play Frisbee golf, and boy did I learn a lot. The kids found it really funny that there was an actual game involving Frisbees and golf. They came along to our first practice. Deanna had discovered a local course, which surprised me because I didn't know there were real courses for it. Some were regular golf courses, and some were just set up in parks. I was amazed that there was enough interest to create places for playing Frisbee golf. We all learned how to throw the Frisbees into a metal cage at about head height, and how the rules are a lot like golf. You even tee off. There are different types of Frisbees for different distances, much like using various clubs in real golf. If you wanted to throw farther, you needed a heavier Frisbee with sharper edges because it cuts through the air more easily. There are also different throwing styles and things to think about, like the wind. The wind affects a Frisbee more than a golf ball, even though it affects both. There was much more to this than I had expected. We all went to the park to practice. Deanna, me, the kids, everyone. Surprisingly, we had a great time together. The kids hit me with Frisbees a few times on purpose, of course. Everyone laughed, and we cheered when Deanna got a hole in one. The kids were really into it too, and we ended up holding a mini tournament right there. I won, of course, and it had nothing to do with nudging anyone while they threw. I don't cheat. Well, not much. Except Deanna, she really knew how to bend the rules. What's even stranger is that after a couple of hours of play, when it got dark, we were all tired. We had just thrown a Frisbee around, but it turns out that it can be more tiring than it looks. Or maybe we all just needed some exercise. Probably both. Naturally, Simon got excited when I mentioned it to him, and I told him to put away his credit card before he bought an expensive Frisbee. I knew he would, and Polly would roll her eyes at me for not stopping him. I told him it was a family-only thing, and that did the trick. So that was something unexpected but fun. I knew that I would be spending 2 more hours a week with Deanna. We were to meet 2 times a week. That meant 4 hours of being together, as I was told. I didn't resist. I managed to toss the Frisbee to her a few times, and I said sorry afterwards, of course. Then the weekend event she promised came around, and that was when I started to feel a bit anxious. Okay, ladies, who wants the macchiato? Deanna asked, holding up another Starbucks cup and trying to read the name on it. She wasn't pleased that she couldn't make out this name or the one on the other cup. The only name she could read was Dina, which was not hers. She sighed, thinking it shouldn't be that hard. The other women exchanged smiles. Not having to deal with Deanna's coffee order was a nice break, and it seemed the plan was going well. Deanna had gathered everyone together, explained that things were going positively, and called for a celebration. Everyone happily agreed when she suggested Starbucks instead of her place. So they ended up sitting at the Starbucks on Nightingale Road in Schaumburg. Even better, Deanna was paying. Rhonda arrived just after lunch and took over the couch area of the coffee shop, giving others a glare if they tried to sit nearby. Eventually, the others showed up and settled in, talking about books while they waited for Deanna, who soon appeared looking a bit rushed. Sorry I'm late, ladies. I had some urgent tasks to handle. There was a hotel issue with the conference I'm working on. We had to find new places for 11 delegates, which was quite a hassle, she said with a friendly smile. Then she added, Let me get you all a coffee or something to apologize. Everyone was glad to accept. Once they had their drinks, Deanna took a seat and looked around. All right, it's update time. Good things are happening. I'll drink to that, said Rhonda, lifting her cup. Me too, added May. They all shared a toast. Now, tell us the details. Have you had a good time with him yet? Asked Rhonda with a playful smile. You know that's not the plan yet. We need to make him feel at ease first. replied Deanna as she took a sip of her latte. True. But if everything is going well, why wait? You have to think of your own needs, too, Rhonda teased back. Deanna shot her a look. Trey came up with an idea that turned out well, Deanna said. May glanced around and asked, Is he not joining us today? No, I'll see him later, Deanna replied quickly. May studied Deanna but kept her thoughts to herself. What was the idea? Gina asked, finally speaking up. Well, Deanna said in a secretive tone, he suggested we try a sport together, something where we'd be on the same team and have to practice. Something we had never tried before, which meant we were both learning together. It was something the whole family could enjoy, so we decided to play. Frisbee golf. For a moment there was silence. Then Gina, trying not to laugh, said, Well, that sounds unique. I know it sounds silly, but we had such a great time. The whole family was together, laughing and being playful. It felt like the good old days. That was the goal of the whole event. That's good to hear, May replied. Do you think it will work? What are your thoughts? Deanna set her drink down and thought for a moment. I've been taking it one day at a time, really, not focusing too much on the future. I'm just trying to make each event the best it can be. But you're right. I need to check in on Ryan, talk to him, see how he's feeling. It's tough to read him these days, especially since he used to share so much. Now he keeps things to himself. I hoped we would connect more after he read the diaries, but that didn't happen. What was his reaction to reading those? Gina asked. Well, it was strange. He seemed unsure at first. He asked where I was when I was writing and what I was thinking, but he didn't share much about his own thoughts, Deanna explained. Did you ask him? Gina pressed. I tried, but Ryan has this way of making you hesitate to ask things he doesn't want to discuss. It's frustrating because you may not realize it until later that you didn't get the answers you needed, Deanna said. After a moment, she continued, If I had to guess, I'd say he feels confused and a bit lost right now. He's not pushing back, but it feels like he's letting things happen without really being involved. That could be a challenge, Gina noted thoughtfully. I mean, you're the one trying to bring him back and make up for past mistakes. It makes sense that he might keep his distance. I understand, but I hadn't really thought of it that way until you mentioned it. I need to give him more options, make him feel like he's part of the decision-making process, Deanna admitted. The other women nodded in agreement. How do you plan to do that? May asked. I don't know, Deanna said, smiling at her own frustration. The way I'm approaching this kind of takes away his chance to decide. I guess I need to find ways for him to have a say in things, to feel more involved. May cleared her throat and spoke hesitantly. Deanna, I say this with the best intentions and a strong wish to see you two together again, but have you thought about how much manipulation is happening here? It doesn't feel respectful the way you are going about this. Have you really considered it? Deanna looked at May in surprise, as did the other women. Well, I've been honest with him about what we're doing and why. I don't quite understand what you mean. We all agreed on this plan. May took a moment to think before replying. Deanna, there's more than one way to approach this. When you say to Ryan, I want to go away with you to Minneapolis, it sounds very different from saying, I've made this plan to make you interested in me again and you don't get a say in it. Did you express it that way? Deanna looked confused. Are you saying we shouldn't follow through with this? Just let it go? Her voice sounded almost whiny. No, I'm just concerned. I think what you are doing is fine. It's a good plan. But I'm worried about why you are doing it. The way you talk about Ryan isn't how a loving partner should speak. I think you might be too focused on the plan itself and not enough on the reasons behind it. I don't get it. We all know why I'm doing this. I want my husband back. I want my children back. I want my life back. Surely we all understand that. Deanna looked at the other two women, confused by their expressions. May noticed the doubt on the faces around her and decided to back off for now, saying softly, Of course. I don't know what I was thinking. Deanna searched May's face for answers. After a few moments' hesitation, she turned back to the other girls. Okay, so Minneapolis is a go. It's all set. Now we need to talk about Vegas because that's going to be tricky. Getting Ryan on board with the new ideas will not be easy, but it's important to me now, and any future we have will need it. Here's what I'm thinking, Rhonda. Can you double-check this? So yeah, that was fun, said Deanna, weaving through the crowd with Trey following a bit behind. She was holding a large stuffed minion toy. It was obviously a cheap version, but she held onto it tightly. You really didn't have to win this for me. Trey stopped and bowed dramatically, waving his hands as he did so. For you, my lady, it was nothing. Deanna paused to look him over before bursting into laughter. Sure, right, Sir Galahad. Are you going to lay your cloak on the ground too? Trey feigned annoyance. No, I'm going to push you into a puddle instead, ungrateful one. Deanna smiled and extended her hand. Well, gallant knight, what shall we do next? This fun fair was a great idea. I'm sure the family would enjoy their time here. They would definitely love the cotton candy, too. I'm sure they would, Trey replied. He looked around and said, What do you think about the do-it-yourself Ferris wheel? It looks a little shaky, but it should be fine. Deanna glanced at it and said, Sure, it looks a bit tight, but I think we can manage. She smiled playfully at him and added, Come on up and join me. She tried to sound cheerful. Sure. Trey stammered, a little surprised. A few minutes later, they were seated in the Ferris wheel compartment. It was a small wheel, just big enough for the two of them. The other compartments were full of high school students who were caught up in their own moments. Deanna and Trey exchanged shy looks, feeling a bit out of place since they were older and not doing the same. So, let's talk about something. Anything at all, Deanna said, a bit nervously. It's funny, Trey replied, looking off into the distance. I was never allowed to come to these fairs when I was a kid. Really? Asked Deanna, curious. Why not? My dad didn't like them. He thought the rides were weak, didn't care for the prices, and didn't trust the people running it. He just wasn't a fan at all. That's unfortunate, Deanna said thoughtfully. They made the full circle in silence, then she added shyly, I loved them when I was a kid. I have a memorable experience from one. Really? Trey said, surprised she would share that. Yeah, it was with Ronnie McLeod, my first real crush. She looked away, feeling a bit shy about sharing her past. There was a pause, then Trey said quietly, Wow. After a moment, hesitantly, he admitted, Mine was with Sheila Conroy, in the back of a car back in the late 90s. It was awkward and full of mistakes. I really didn't know what I was doing, still don't, according to my ex-wife. His emotion was clear. I'm sorry, Deanna said softly. I didn't mean to bring up bad memories. No, it's okay, Trey replied, though it clearly wasn't. I've moved on. Can I help? Deanna asked. Do you want to talk about it? It can be good to share. I want to know about your life. Trey looked at her, and the wheel stopped moving at the top while people got on and off below them. Are you sure? It's a pretty sad story. I'm definitely sure, she said gently. Please let me in. All right, don't say I didn't warn you. We were married for about 6 years and then... The fair music played on and the wheel continued to turn. It was a long week for me. There were many meetings, a lot of sitting around listening to our team talk. There were 5 of us now, and I thought carpenters argued a lot, but game developers took it to a whole new level. It was strange how they could shout and tease each other, then just laugh and go out for lunch as if nothing had happened. I might never understand these creative folks, but I guess that's not my job. I just have to trust them, which can be tough. Anyway, the weekend finally came. It was a long weekend, and while Monday was a day off, we decided to take Friday off too. So, when I got home on Thursday night, I found a strange van in my driveway. My kids bouncing around, a few packed bags in the hallway, and my ex-wife enjoying one of my special coffees, sitting at my kitchen table with Paula, looking at an iPad. I just stood there in surprise. The kids froze and stared back at me, and Deanna looked up from the iPad. Ah, there you are. We were just about to send out a search party. Nice to see you too. What exactly is happening? Deanna gave me a bright smile. We're going on a road trip. This is part 2 of Operation Ryan. I did mention it. What? I said, trying to sound smart. I have things to do this weekend. I can't just change my plans like this. Deanna looked at Paula, who had a big smile and seemed ready to burst with excitement. Teenage girls have always puzzled me. Relax, Mr. Grumpy. You don't have anything important this weekend. Agent Paula here has been gathering intel, and we have everything figured out. The bags are packed, and I rented a van. We're heading to the Mall of America. Saffron raced into the kitchen, yelling while Jamie chased her. "Dad! Dad! Jamie won't leave me alone! He keeps trying to bother me!" I grabbed Jamie as he ran by and picked him up by his legs, holding him upside down. I looked at him face to face and asked, "Son, is this true?" He mumbled something quickly, so I shook him gently and said, "Be honest. Are you bothering your sister just to tease her?" His upside-down gaze was hard to read, but he nodded slowly. I set him down. "Good. That's what siblings are for. Now go get her." "Dad!" Saffron screamed, hitting high notes only preteen girls can reach. "That's not my problem, Saffy. You brought this on yourself for having a little brother." They dashed off again. I knew I'd hear about it later. Maybe I'd find something funny in my bed, or they'd switch the sugar with salt in my cereal. My children are always creative when it comes to getting back at others. I went to the coffee maker and poured myself a cup, grumbling that Deanna had finished my favorite caramel coffee. It seems she liked it too, which was not a surprise since her own coffee was quite bad. I never understood how that happened. How could someone mess up making coffee? You just pour it from the packet into the filter, add water, and that's all? But somehow, she managed. At least now that she wasn't living with us, I didn't have to share my good coffee. "So, Paula, did you pack for me or did Deanna do it?" I asked, trying to stay calm, a little worried that it might be Deanna's packing. I could handle most things, but that would be crossing a line. "Relax, Dad. There's nothing embarrassing in there. But I do think it's time to get rid of some of those old underwear. They are looking pretty worn." I ended up laughing and nearly spat out some apple cider. That is definitely something a dad does not want to hear from his teenage daughter. "Well, that's a talk for another day, I think. Maybe a few thousand days away," I replied, giving her a serious look. Saffron and Jamie rushed through the kitchen again, this time with Saffron chasing Jamie and shouting. Deanna watched them, her expression hard to read like regret, happiness, and amusement all mixed together. I sighed and asked, "So, when are we leaving for this big shopping trip?" I really disliked malls, especially the large ones. The older I got, the less I wanted to be around crowds. It always felt like people's intelligence dropped after they gathered in groups of 8 or more. I wasn't a fan of just looking around. I preferred to know what I wanted ahead of time, do my research, get it, and then go home. That was shopping for me. But women? Well, let's just say that if they didn't try on at least 10 different things, how could they be sure they found the right one? Right, ladies? But still, I let myself be guided along. Honestly, I thought about it. Did I really want to spend a long weekend stuck with my ex-wife and all the kids? It felt a bit like I was trapped. But then I thought, if we hadn't split up, we would be doing this anyway. I had promised Deanna she could have this chance, so what did I really have to lose? So I decided to just relax and not get worked up about it. We all climbed into the van. It was nice, a Chrysler Town and Country with leather seats and a DVD player. Then we hit the road to Minneapolis, all 12 hours of it. We spent the trip enjoying movies, singing, and playing a game of Would You Rather. This was the first time Jamie was old enough to understand the questions and join in. At one point, the kids were quiet in the back after a lively debate about who would win in a fight between Pokémon and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I learned that there are actually forums dedicated to Pokémon theories and conspiracies. Thank goodness for the internet. It really helps with learning. I looked back and saw Paula on her iPad, while Saffron and Jamie were both asleep in their chairs, leaned back comfortably. I turned to Deanna, who was focused on driving. As I looked out the window, I remembered a time when we had taken this same route. It was shortly after we got married, and we had decided to head west on I-90 for a long weekend. We didn't have a specific destination. We passed through Minneapolis, stopped by the Mall of America for a quick visit, and then went to see Mount Rushmore. It took us 2 days to get there, traveling through the beautiful Badlands of North Dakota. When we finally arrived at Mount Rushmore, we could only get about a mile away, and after half an hour, we got back in the car to find something else to explore. It was impressive to see, but once you've experienced it, you don't really need to spend more time there. We ended up going to see Devil's Tower in Wyoming, which was definitely worth the trip. You could actually climb it and get a closer look. Thinking about those past trips made me feel nostalgic, which I'm sure was part of the plan. I glanced at Deanna, who was looking over at me with a smile. She said softly, "Do you remember the last time we were on this road?" I nodded, smiling as I recalled some of the fun we had. We both remembered that moment fondly, but with the kids in the car, we didn't need to mention those details. Our shared history was enough for that moment. The weekend turned out to be enjoyable, even if I didn't want to admit it. We went to the mall and I managed to avoid most of the shopping. We visited the Lego attraction first. Jamie, Saffron, and I then went to the Nickelodeon theme park. I thought it should have been a Charlie Brown theme park instead. When I went to the Mall of America with Deanna, I really believed it had been a Charlie Brown theme park back then. We also explored the Sea Life Aquarium while Paula and Deanna went shopping. They spent quite a bit of money. Paula would be babysitting for a long time to pay me back for what she borrowed to cover everything. The hotel worked out well. We had 2 rooms. Deanna stayed in one with Paula and Saffron, while Jamie and I took the other. On Saturday night, we headed down to the hotel bar for a drink while Paula watched the kids. It was mostly light conversation. We didn't touch on any serious subjects, which was nice. It felt a lot like the old days, but there was a distance that hadn't been there before. I sensed that was intentional. They wanted to bring back family feelings without pushing too far into old habits. I found myself slipping into familiar patterns. It was surprisingly easy. I had been apart from Deanna for over 18 months, and I had learned to cope without her. I still had many memories about her that would pop up randomly, but I'd worked through the hurt, and I had made some progress in moving on. What surprised me was being back around my family and realizing how much of our connection had nothing to do with our past feelings for each other. I could feel comfortable with Deanna as co-parents, dealing with everything that came with that, without having a romantic relationship. I was amazed at how much of being a parent was separate from being in love. That said, there were still moments when things could have turned playful. Even so, those moments were less frequent than I might have expected. When we went down for our drinks, I felt a bit anxious. Deanna and I had never really discussed in detail what had happened between us. We had only touched on it briefly, and I wasn't ready to dive deeper that night. I still wasn't clear about my own feelings. Once, while having drinks, I tried to talk to Simon and Polly about it, but they responded with sarcasm and harsh comments, focusing more on their frustrations than listening to me. I knew I could never just accept what Deanna had done or simply move past it. Our marriage was over, that was clear, and I had taken steps to protect my own self-worth. But now that things had calmed down, what was next? I had gotten my life back in order, kept my kids with me, and moved on, mostly. I still hadn't really started a new romance, which puzzled me. I had tried, but hadn't felt much interest. That didn't seem healthy. Were there lingering feelings I needed to address? If there were, they weren't obvious. Did I want to reconnect with Deanna? Part of me did. I knew her well. I had been happy with her before things changed. She clearly wanted to reconnect too. She recognized the good we had and was making an effort. It felt easy. Yet I worried about being hurt again. I also had my self-respect to consider, and I struggled to trust anyone. As I thought more about it, I realized that the trust issues went beyond just my feelings for Deanna. When she had shaken things up in my life, the effects spread wider than I had imagined. Maybe that was why my attempts at dating hadn't gone well. I reflected on all of this while sitting in the hotel room after a shower, listening to Paula complain about her tired feet. I had said, "Well, if you run around a mall all day in flip-flops, what do you expect?" She rolled her eyes and continued her complaining. At times, she really reminded me of her mother. I dressed in the bathroom and then sat on the bed, listening to Paula while Saffron and Jamie entertained themselves in Deanna's room, watching a cartoon about a kid with fairy godparents. Suddenly, Paula looked at me and asked, "You okay, Dad?" I stared at her for a moment, speechless and feeling anxious. It seemed like everyone expected so much from me, and I wasn't sure I could meet those expectations, nor was I certain I wanted to. "Oh, Dad," she said, suddenly sitting next to me and wrapping her arms around me. "It's okay, Dad, it's okay." I wasn't crying, not at all. I just wanted to make that clear. I felt a bit withdrawn. Paula pulled back and studied my face. "It's all happening very fast, isn't it? Mom being back and us doing things like this? Has anyone even asked you what you want?" I didn't answer, not trusting my voice. Why was it my daughter who noticed and not someone else? "Dad, it's okay. If you don't want to go down for a drink, just stay with me. We can watch a movie. Jamie and Saffron are fine in the other room. Don't let her little plans stress you out." At that moment, I felt so proud of my daughter. I'm okay, Paula. I'll manage. I'm just not always sure what I think or want, I said, managing to say something. I love you, Dad. Whatever you want is fine by me, she said. I smiled back and stood up, checking the mirror one last time to make sure everything was in place. Off into the great unknown, I whispered. Is that a movie reference? Paula asked from the bed, tilting her head. You don't know? Look it up. I laughed at her. But my excitement faded. Deanna was waiting for me in the hotel bar. A glass of red wine was in front of her, and a beer was ready for me. Her face lit up with a smile when I sat down. She was dressed nicely, as she always was. There you are. I was starting to worry, she said. I grimaced and replied, It takes more than a little shopping to slow me down. She gently touched my hand and said, I get that. I have a feeling we both know what can slow you down. I moved my hand away without thinking. That felt like a clear signal. Deanna quickly added, Just kidding, Ryan. While I wouldn't mind some fun, we have children to think about. I don't think either of us is ready for that right now. That time will come later. She paused and looked closely at me, then continued, I can tell you're anxious. Don't worry. I'm not here to propose or grill you. There will be a time for that, but not tonight. Let's just enjoy our evening together, okay? We don't need to discuss deep feelings tonight. Just relax. Feeling a bit reassured, she changed the topic to work stuff, talking about how hard it was to get women to arrive on time for conferences. Apparently, some who were focused on their looks didn't think being punctual was part of their job. It was a pleasant night. We chatted, laughed a bit, and shared memories, carefully avoiding any heavy topics. At least it showed that we could spend time together without feeling overwhelmed, which was a step forward compared to the past year and a half. At one point, I asked her about the people she was working with. Who are they? How did you meet them? You might find it hard to believe. Jim, our therapist, mentioned a support group. At that time, I only had my sister Melissa. I love her, but she isn't very helpful. You know what I mean. Crystal wasn't talking to me either, and honestly, I wouldn't know how to react to anything she'd say. So I went looking and found them on Craigslist of all places. Really? What did their ads say? Oh, it was something like support group for those dealing with betrayal or something similar. They made it clear in the ad that the group was for women only and was not just about finding casual relationships. I had some doubts, similar to how some support groups might focus more on hiding their issues instead of truly dealing with them. But I spoke with May, who started the group, and after meeting them, I felt better. We gather once a week and talk about different topics, including our recovery journeys. It's like a social club where everyone understands each other because of our shared experiences. Is it helpful? I asked, curious. Oh, yes, very much so. I no longer feel alone. There are people I can talk to who understand, and they don't judge me because they've faced similar challenges. She shared stories about the different members in the group, describing who they were and what they had been through. I listened intently. The next day we drove home, but I thought the forced singing in the car was too much. I dislike singing in public, and they all knew that, so I guessed it was a plan to tease Dad. I got my own revenge, though. I was feeling a bit gassy that day from the breakfast burrito I had, and I made sure to disable the window controls so that only I could open or close them. I felt victorious. Deanna looked up at the sky as she left the movie theater. The air was chilly and it seemed like rain might come. Without an umbrella, she turned up the collar of her coat to protect herself. They were outside the AMC 21 theaters on Illinois Saint, having just finished watching Foster Fight, a comedy about 3 kids trying to get adopted by the family that had temporarily taken them in. You didn't think it was a bit, well, silly? Asked Trey, walking out behind her. What? It all made sense. Everything came together nicely and everyone got what they needed. What more can you ask for? She replied, a bit impatient. Well, the idea was kind of ridiculous and the ending was hard to believe. The couple just happens to win the lottery so they can adopt all 3 kids at once? Come on, that doesn't really happen. Deanna sighed. You sound just like Ryan. That's exactly what he would have said. She didn't miss the frown on Trey's face as he replied, Yes, I'm sure he would. Deanna laughed and said, Don't take it so personally. You all think the same. It's not a big deal. Many guys struggle with stories that deal with feelings. It's a known fact. You all just want to relax, watch sports, and enjoy life without thinking too deeply. The idea that feelings matter seems lost on you." Trey looked at her for a moment with a playful expression of distaste. "You know, just for that, you deserve a little punishment." A big, strong man mimicked an ape, making everyone laugh. Deanna found it funny and replied casually, "Promises, promises," while playfully raising her eyebrows. Trey paused his act, looked at her, and said softly, "If you really want." Deanna held his gaze for a moment before looking away to find a taxi. After a short search, she spotted one, waved it down, and it quickly turned around to stop for her. She would have driven, but it was a busy day, and she had spent it at an office arguing with a committee about an event she was organizing. She preferred not to drive in Chicago during the day because of the terrible parking fees. As the taxi arrived, she turned back to Trey. "Do you want to grab a drink? I still want to hear your thoughts on how to act at Ryan's office. I'm not sure how I should present myself to his coworkers. Am I just the busy mom? Or should I be more professional or act like I'm his partner?" Trey took a deep breath and replied, "All right, let's go to that bar on Clark with all the whiskeys. The Duke of Perth, I think, and about your work situation. I suggest keeping a professional distance." His voice trailed off as he climbed into the cab. The doors closed and they pulled away. When I got to work on Monday, I arrived early. I unlocked the office doors and set my backpack down in my office. I then walked into our small kitchenette. The office was cozy with a conference room, 3 offices, a shared open area, 2 bathrooms, shared with the accounting group next door, and a reception area. It wasn't fancy, but it was affordable and met our needs. I had decided to open up some walls to soundproof the space after hearing the noise from 2 programmers blasting music at full volume during our first week there. Inside, my 2 partners shared an office, and there were 2 interns in the open area. We had hired a user interface designer the previous week, along with a texture artist and a sound person on a short-term contract working in another office. As for me, we had room for 4 more people in the open area. Once the sound guy finished his contract, we could bring in an art director and maybe a design director. A couple more artists would help us get closer to finishing the game as we planned. I finished brewing coffee using a large industrial coffee maker and debated whether to buy a Keurig for the office. They were nice, but given how much these guys drank, it could get expensive. I was still trying to figure out how to keep my important things safe. As I walked back into my office, I heard a ruckus at the front near the reception area. I stepped out there, sipping my very strong coffee that I had messed up. It tasted almost as bad as Deanna's. I stopped in my tracks when I saw the scene in the reception area. My partners, Deke and Kevin, were standing at the front, looking at Deanna, who was sitting behind the receptionist desk. She was dressed for work and was saying, "So you boys will be my helpers for a couple of weeks. Do you have a sign-in sheet? Ah, Ryan, there you are." She was direct and in charge. "If that's coffee, I'll take one. Now, I'll need a laptop and a phone. This chair isn't great, but I'll make it work." "What?" She was looking at me expectantly. I wasn't saying anything, just staring. Kevin and Deke shuffled nervously, glancing at each other, then her, then me. "Deanna, can I have a moment with you in my office?" I said firmly. I was in charge, and I didn't intend to let that go. I turned and walked back to my office without checking if she was coming. I entered my office, carefully set down my coffee, sat in my comfortable chair, and looked at Deanna standing across the table. She looked good, I had to admit. Her hair was neatly styled, and she had some makeup on. She even seemed taller. Maybe it was the heels. "So?" I began. She smiled at me with a bit of a condescending look, like she was talking to someone who should understand, but clearly did not. She had mastered this tone. I had felt it often during our marriage when she thought I was being slow or forgetful. "It's one of my tasks, Ryan. I'm here to help you for a couple of weeks, show you I can be useful, you remember? We talked about this." Her voice rose slightly at the end, like she thought there was no need to discuss it further. It's ironic not being married to her made me realize I had just accepted this treatment before feeling like I was being treated as if I didn't know anything. Not anymore. It was Monday morning. I hadn't had enough coffee yet, and this was my office, not hers. You can drop that attitude, Deanna. We aren't married anymore, and I won't take this. This is my office. You can't come in here and talk down to me. If you can't show some respect, then please leave. Is that clear? I said firmly. Her confident demeanor faded instantly, and she sat down in the chair in front of me. Sorry, Ryan, I just got a little carried away. Never mind, I'm sorry. Yes, this is your office. I understand. I didn't mean to. While she was quickly apologizing, I looked at her closely. I didn't remember her saying she would come, but that didn't mean she hadn't. Honestly, I hadn't been paying much attention to her plans. I knew I had to work on that. If we were going to work well together, I needed to respect her and pay attention. Wait. If we were going to work well together? What? Okay, I said in a softer tone, interrupting her flustered apology. So, what exactly do you plan to do for us? I mean, you don't know anything about video games? She smiled brightly, and I could tell she had a prepared response. Well, yes, that is true. I don't know much about video games, and to be honest, it doesn't bother me. But I do know how to organize and manage an office. You might be getting by for now, but that's because you haven't had a good admin. You do now. You'll be surprised by what I can do. Just give me a chance. Think of it as one more reason to trust me. I started to see her point. If I trusted her in the office, it could lead to other good things. It was clear where this was headed, and she was being honest about it. It felt like one of those moments where I could ask myself, what do I have to lose? Honestly, I couldn't see any losses. Even if she just answered the phones and got snacks, it would be an improvement. It did bother me a little that I was accepting this change in my life because I was asking, what do I have to lose? Instead of, do I want this? But then again, it was Monday morning, and I hadn't even had my coffee yet. This was more of a Friday afternoon kind of decision. She was looking at me eagerly, so I took a sip of my coffee to buy some time and look like I was thinking it over. That was a mistake. The coffee was extremely hot, and I splattered it all over the desk. Deanna's eyes sparkled, and I saw her try not to laugh. She looked cute when she did that. She knew I had already made a decision. Wiping my jacket and shirt, I shot her a playful glare, which she knew was just for fun. Then I said, fine, if that's what it takes. Do what you need to do. Go check the kitchen and see what we need. Make a list for me, and I'll give you some cash and the Costco card. She coughed and asked, what about a laptop? I pointed toward the open area outside the office. There should be a MacBook Air out there somewhere. We have 3 around here. Talk to Deke, and he'll help you get set up on the network, give you an email and access to the Google Docs we use. There's an iPad somewhere in there if you want to check out the game. She smiled again and said, it will be great working with you, Ryan, you'll see. And it won't cost you anything. I'm available to help in many ways. Then she stood up, filling the room with her pleasant scent and a mix of charm and skill. It was quite an unusual mix, and she truly helped out. After about 3 days, she asked for a key because she didn't like waiting outside for me to show up. There was no chance the others would arrive before I did. But her? She often came by with treats like donuts, bagels, or sweet cakes. She knew that the way to win over anyone is often through food and quickly made friends with everyone in the office. Things got better with her around, even though it was hard to admit. She played our game on the iPad and had thoughts about it. One of her questions was, why haven't you shown this to Jamie yet? Which was a good point. The problem was, we were all perfectionists. We wanted everything to be just right before showing it to anyone. She helped us see that we needed to share it with others before we got too deep into details like graphics and sound. She was right. When I took it home and showed it to Jamie, he played it for a bit and gave us some honest feedback about our design choices. In his straightforward way, he pointed out what was good and what needed work. It was useful feedback, and I felt a bit embarrassed that I didn't think of it myself. She also started looking at similar games and playing them. She gave suggestions for improvement. It got to the point where she was not just listening in design meetings, but also sharing her own ideas, just like everyone else. And the amazing part was that everyone began to take her seriously. Then the office changed. It wasn't just tidier, the kitchen was organized too. Dishes got cleaned, phones were answered, and there were pastries in the mornings. The fridge, which was usually avoided, was cleaned out. We even began getting different lunches together. But there was more. By the end of those 2 weeks, we got interviews from some websites and magazines. That caught me off guard. I hadn't thought about getting attention before our release, but she did. She reached out to gaming websites and asked if they would like to talk to us. I didn't do much of the talking, but I sat in with the guys and it went well. People started to follow our Twitter account, which meant we needed to share something on it. We had created a website early on, including a blog, but we hadn't posted anything. Now, with Deanna's encouragement, we began to. We wrote a weekly developers blog and people seemed to enjoy it. Our lead programmer even got invited to be on a podcast. It felt strange. Having a receptionist and someone to handle public relations really made us feel more like a real business. I realized that even when Deanna left us, she had mentioned that she could stay for 2 weeks, but then had to return to her real job. We would need to find someone to take her place. It seemed important, even though I hadn't thought so before. This wasn't just about work. One day she walked into my office, closed the door, and in a playful way teased me. She left with a smile, saying, "Just keeping you interested." It was loud enough for everyone to hear. I was caught off guard and didn't know how to respond. While I was surprised, my body reacted without my mind knowing what to do. I sat there holding a cup of coffee, feeling flustered. Honestly, it had been a long time for me. Over those 2 weeks, we had dinner together 8 times, sometimes at her place and other times at mine, even with family involved. On one occasion, she came over and made dinner for us. I had a conversation with Paula because I realized Deanna had a key to my house, which felt like too much. Once I noticed, I asked for it back. Deanna gave it to me reluctantly, but I stood my ground. I hadn't been asked for a key to her place, so I didn't think it was fair for her to have one to mine. I also had a talk with Paula about how far things had gone. I was generally okay with most of it, but I wanted to make sure there were boundaries, and this was one of them. The family dinners were nice, to be honest. It was easy to fall back into familiar patterns, and I was reminded that co-parenting didn't have much to do with being a couple. Then, during the last meal at her house, everything changed again. She had made a delicious dish with scallops and linguine and white wine sauce, which I really liked. The kids were in the other room watching TV while I helped clean up, carrying plates from the table. Just as I turned around, she surprised me by coming over and kissing me. It was unexpected, but when you haven't kissed anyone in a long time, it felt nice. So, yes, we kissed. She put a lot of effort into it, I could tell. There was no long conversation after that. She just stepped back, smiled, and said, "I've waited so long to do that. Sorry I had to catch you when you weren't busy, just as good as I remembered." I stood there unsure of what to say, trying hard to keep my first thought to myself. My immediate reaction was, "But not good enough to choose me over that other guy." I wanted to say it, but I held back. I still don't know why. Maybe I was growing up or moving on, but it was still the first thing that popped into my head, so I guess I'm not completely over it. I saved that thought for later talks with the guys. The rest of the night, she acted like nothing special had happened. I sat there watching TV without really paying attention, trying to figure out what I should do next, if anything at all. Then the week passed, and other things took over. "Oh my gosh," said Deanna, clearly emphasizing each word. "Are you really sure about this, Rhonda?" Rhonda grinned at Deanna as she looked at the dress she had just tried on. Her smile widened into a playful grin. "Oh yes. Think you can wear this?" "Well, I wouldn't normally wear something like this. I mean, it's so, well, a bit too flashy." "Exactly," Rhonda replied, looking her up and down. She got up and came over to adjust the dress, giving Deanna a playful nudge. "Rhonda!" Deanna squealed. "Come on! You're wearing this dress. You can't act so proper. Plus, the woman running the store is convinced we're a couple. Might as well give her a little show. Want to pretend to kiss a bit? Really give her something to think about?" "Rhonda!" Deanna exclaimed, even more stunned. Rhonda laughed and stepped back to look at Deanna. "Well, if that doesn't catch his attention, I think he might not be interested. We just need some nice shoes and a little extra sparkle, and you're all set. Honestly, even I'd notice you." "I'm sorry if I'm late," Deanna said breathlessly as she sat down at their table in the Applebee's. It was raining outside, and she was slightly warm from the humidity in the bar area. Trey smiled at her and said, "No, you're right on time. I'm sorry. Ryan and the team went over the new bug database tonight, and I was trying to help them understand it. For a group of techies, they really struggle with basic organization." "Well," Trey said, trying to change the topic, "you're here now. So what do you feel like eating? We still have an hour of happy hour left. Want to see how happy we can get? Deanna laughed and said, I'll take $5 worth of happiness, please. Coming right up, Trey called to the waiter, not noticing the frown on Deanna's face at the word please. She didn't like being reminded of that. 2 margaritas, please. The silver kind, on the rocks, he said, glancing at Deanna for confirmation. She nodded. The waiter left and Trey continued, I thought so, just needed to double check. So what do you want to talk about tonight? Deanna asked. I was thinking, Trey said hesitantly, maybe we could talk about something else. Not the plan, just for tonight. Deanna nodded slightly. That's fine, but I really want to go over the plans for Vegas one more time. Rhonda and I made some changes, and I want to go over them with you. I need to make sure we're on the right track. There's some risk here, and I need to know what signs to look for in case I need to back off. I need to see that if I push too far. Okay? Trey tried to hide his irritation and nodded. Sure, okay. That's what I'm here for, after all, he said quietly, and Deanna didn't notice the hint of sarcasm in his voice. I know, Deanna replied, looking at him kindly. It's always about Ryan or the kids. So what did you want to discuss? I'm not sure, Trey said, fiddling with his napkin. Life, truth, the pursuit of happiness. If not that, maybe big TVs and fun topics. Deanna nearly spit out her drink and coughed, looking at Trey. Fun topics? She asked, a playful smile forming. Well, yeah, Trey replied. It's an easy topic for guys. For example, do you think that woman's look is genuine? He said, nodding slightly towards a couple at a nearby table. A younger woman was sitting with an older man, dressed elegantly but showing off a bit. Deanna glanced over, trying not to be obvious. Then her eyes returned to Trey. Definitely not genuine, and she's not as young as she wants to seem. Look at how it's all pushed up. She's definitely using some enhancements. Without support, it wouldn't look like that. Trey looked at her surprised, then said, Wow, see? With you around, I learn all sorts of things. How do you know so much about that stuff? Yours are real, right? Deanna smiled and replied, Yes, all real here. Models often talk about enhancements and even compare them. They get very open about it. Now it was Trey's turn to be surprised. Really? No way, he said, eyes wide. Yep, Deanna chuckled. Calm down now. I don't really get the fuss about looks anyway. Are these enough? She said, lifting them with both hands. Deanna? Trey whispered urgently, looking around. You'll get us in trouble. Deanna laughed and let them drop. Well, you asked for it. If this gets you excited, just wait until you see the dress I have. Now, are we getting something to eat or what? It was Friday, though I almost forgot. I arrived at work a bit late. Deanna was already there. I remembered it was her last day. There were donuts on the front counter, and she was on a call with someone on Skype as I walked in. I noticed several donuts were missing, so the others must have already been in. She smiled at me and, covering her mouth, said, Morning, bossman. Sorry, I have to take this. It's about a conference next week. I nodded back, grabbed my favorite creme-filled donut, and wandered into the office. I noticed her overnight bag by her desk, but didn't ask why it was there. An hour passed quietly, and at 10 a.m., Deanna peeked into my office. I was busy playing the latest version of the game and struggling against the boss in the 3rd level. I was jotting down notes, one of them saying, Need to improve the graphics on level 3. It felt familiar, but it seemed fitting. Ready to go? She asked with a smile. I set down the iPad and replied, confused. Go? Go where? We don't have any meetings planned, do we? No, Ryan, I asked you to keep this weekend open and it looks like you did, right? Honestly, I had completely forgotten about her request, but I also had no plans aside from hanging out with friends, fixing the garage keypad, and maybe playing some frisbee. I frowned at the thought. I was being lazy and needed to change that, just not this weekend. So it wasn't a loss whatever she had in mind I would be able to join. I nodded. Of course, I keep my promises. I took this chance to seem responsible while ignoring that it might have come off as a jab at her. Luckily, she didn't seem to notice. Great. We're all set to go. We just need to stop by your place first, but we have plenty of time. Plenty of time for what? I asked, feeling this was more than just a casual outing. Don't worry. I've planned everything. Just wait and see. Get your things ready. We need to head out. She left, and I sat there for a moment, feeling nostalgic. She had done things like this before. For my 30th birthday, she surprised me with a trip to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. I had a feeling she was planning something, but I had no idea what until we got to the airport and boarded the plane. I remembered our past trip. She had worn a bold dress that showed off her back, and she received compliments for it, even though she wasn't dressed like everyone else. Those were happier times. I gathered my things, putting my laptop in my backpack along with the iPad. I turned off my desktop, grabbed my coat, and walked out of the office. I noticed that everyone had left early too, at 10 a.m. That would definitely be a topic for Monday. We left her car in the parking lot and took mine, putting her bag in the trunk. We got back to my house in about 30 minutes. Even though I asked, I still had no idea what was planned for us. When I opened the door, I found my overnight bag all ready and sitting on the floor. I glanced at it, then at Deanna, and then at Paula, who stood in the doorway, arms crossed, smiling. "You two have fun now," she said. I looked at her and then at Deanna, asking, "So, kids?" Deanna understood what I meant and replied confidently, "My sister. I know she's not your favorite, but she will manage with the kids. Think of it this way. She can use some of her money on them for once." I turned back to Paula, who nodded enthusiastically. "Et tu, Brute?" I said, trying to look a little sad. It wasn't hard to do. She just smiled. "Veni, vidi, vici." Great. Now I had taught her to read using Asterix books. I knew that would come back to me someday. I wasn't too happy that Paula had gone through my things to pack for me again. My clothes were looking a bit worn lately, like she mentioned before, but who has time for shopping? If you do, you just go to the nearest store, grab a pack of basics, and leave quickly. I could never manage to look the cashier in the eye. With a deep breath, I picked up my bag, slung my laptop backpack over my shoulder, and said quietly to Deanna, "This better be worth all the trouble I'm getting from my kids." She heard me, and her smile grew wider. "Oh, it will be. Trust me." Her smile faded a bit when she said that, and I just stared at her for a moment before picking up my overnight bag and heading out. As I left, I called back, "Get something nice for me from your aunt, and make it something good. She can afford it. Maybe a new Mustang, a V8 if you can." We reached O'Hare around noon, and it was time to find out the truth. I knew it wasn't an international trip since nobody had mentioned needing a passport. I had my doubts, which were confirmed when we checked in at the United Gate for Las Vegas. As we stood in line, I looked over at Deanna, who was trying hard to appear calm and like a seasoned traveler. She glanced back at me and offered a tight smile. "Really?" I said, nodding towards the departure board. "Come on, live a little. We have some catching up to do." That thought was a bit troubling, was troubling the right word. Exciting, maybe? And not something I wanted to think about just then. Once on the plane, we settled into first class. I was glad I had charged my iPad, since this wasn't one of the newer planes with power outlets. After we got comfortable, I turned to Deanna and asked, "So what are our plans? What are we going to do?" She looked at me, and I noticed a spark in her eye that I hadn't seen in a long time, except for that other time, but I wasn't going to dwell on that. She placed a finger over my lips and said, "Shh, order a drink. We're on vacation." Then, with a playful smile, she took out some headphones from her backpack, plugged them into her iPhone, and signaled that the conversation was over. I knew we were going to Las Vegas, but I had no idea what we would do there. That seemed to be her plan. She managed to fall asleep on the flight. I didn't. I pretended to play Candy Crush Saga and struggled with it. Level 169 was challenging, and I made no progress at all during the flight. My mind was filled with questions. Would we share a room? How many beds were booked? To be honest, I hadn't really engaged with the whole "I'm coming back for you" idea. I had told her, "If you want me back, you figure it out." This meant I wasn't deeply involved. Everything was happening around me, with little emotion from my side. I just rested and enjoyed the ride. I didn't need to worry or do much of anything. I was simply along for the journey. I had known this all along, but managed not to think about it until now, with a drink in hand, flying high in the sky, giving me time to reflect. Everything was nice, there was no doubt about that, but I wasn't challenged to feel anything beyond simple enjoyment. Deanna made sure not to pressure me, wanting to avoid any chance of me backing out, but this meant I didn't really feel much either way about wanting her back. Still, a part of me wondered, why should I? I was the one who had been hurt. I was the one who had to hold everything together after the situation. Why should I have to make any effort? While I understood that living this way wasn't ideal, it felt somewhat true, but it came with the price of not putting in any effort. I had nothing to lose. This was nice, but it also meant I didn't have to care about anything or make any effort at all. I was keeping myself safe and not really engaging in the experience. I wasn't holding up my end of this arrangement. I wasn't sure what to call it, but I knew I wasn't doing my part. I definitely wasn't thinking about any feelings I had about it. I was pretty sure those feelings were there, just below the surface. I was still unreasonably or maybe reasonably angry at times. I felt down whenever something reminded me of a particular moment in my past. It was clear I hadn't gotten over it, which made my distance from everything a bit confusing. I had intentionally not thought about my feelings during the time she was trying to win me back. Maybe it was a way to protect myself. Maybe, worrying as it was, I really was over her, and indifferent was my main feeling. I didn't really know what I felt, and the idea of sharing a bed started to make me think. Where were we headed? Was I really considering getting back together? Did I even care much? What were my true thoughts? I couldn't even get to the big question, could I see myself being in love with Deanna again? However, I could ask myself a more immediate question. Should I have another beer? She did say we were on vacation. In the end, I didn't find any answers, and I didn't make any real progress in my game, but I did have 3 beers and felt no worries. And that was something. At least I pretended it was. Whatever was meant to happen would happen. I felt sure of that, mostly because it meant I didn't have to do anything. I liked thinking like that. It took us 3 hours to reach Las Vegas, and once we got there, we did all the usual things. We stood in line for our luggage and waited a long time for a cab. McCarran Airport isn't the best it seems built to move people in and out quickly, so they can head to the casinos. It feels strange to see slot machines in the airport, but this is Vegas after all. Welcome to America. Eventually, we arrived at the Luxor Casino and Resort. For those who haven't been, the Luxor is a huge pyramid-shaped hotel, about 40 stories tall. It's black and has a casino in the center along with a few theaters and exhibition halls. At that time, they were showcasing an exhibit about the Titanic and another about preserved bodies. I imagined the people who lost a lot of money at the poker tables and couldn't pay. At night, the hotel shines with little white lights along the pyramid's edges and a big beam of light that shoots up from the top. I had never stayed at the Luxor before. In past trips to Vegas, I always chose the cheapest places because we were just going to sleep there. Deanna went to get our room keys, while I watched our bags and admired the large buildings people create when they want to make money. It's amazing what humanity can build when they set their minds to it. It's too bad that most of the time it happens only if there's a profit in it. We went to the moon mainly because we didn't want the Russians to get there first. Deanna returned with a big smile, and we headed to the unique elevators that move at an angle. Elevators have to work this way in a pyramid since all the rooms are on the outside, leaving the inside mostly empty. We arrived on the 34th floor, and it felt strange to walk down a hallway where one side just opened into the vast space of the hotel. Up there, you could easily see how someone might think of jumping down. It would certainly make a big splash. Deanna made a grand effort to open the door to our room, and suddenly it was the moment of truth. How many beds would we have? I felt a bit nervous for a moment. I shook it off and stepped inside. We had a suite. There were 2 rooms, a living area with a couch, a table, and a small desk, and a back room with a large king-sized bed. I glanced at the bed without saying much. Deanna entered behind me and paused before saying, "Well, look, I would like you to join me in bed. But if you don't want to, the couch has a pull-out bed, and I can sleep there." I looked at her, then back at the bed, and mumbled something that didn't come out clearly. Whatever I said, it felt fine to me. Deanna came up from behind and wrapped her arms around me. It was the closest anyone had been to me, aside from my kids, in almost 2 years. She just held me quietly. I wondered how it looked if someone else was watching us. Me standing still, arms at my sides, staring at a bed, and her behind me, wrapping herself around me, offering closeness while I didn't respond. After a moment, she said, It's going to be okay, Ryan, really. Just go with it. It'll be great. She was keeping her spirits up, and I appreciated that because I felt all mixed up inside. She let go of me and said cheerfully, "Okay, let's drop off our bags and go downstairs for a drink. We are on vacation." And so, that's what we did. We went downstairs, and she seemed to know exactly where she was headed. She guided me out of the hotel, across a walkway over the wide streets of Vegas, and into the New York Hotel on the Strip. I just followed her, trying to figure out how I felt. She took me into an Irish bar in the New York casino called Nine Fine Irishmen. It was right up my alley. The walls were made of large wooden panels, and there was a big bar area. It was the kind of place I could enjoy all afternoon. I stopped for a moment, taking it all in, when we entered. Deanna walked a little ahead of me and then noticed I wasn't right behind her. She turned back and smiled. "I thought you would like this place. Let's get a drink." She pointed to a table that actually had a beer pump built into it. It had two, in fact. You could pour your drink right from it, and it would keep track of how much you had and the cost. So that's what we did. As we sat down, Deanna placed her bag on the table, signaled for 2 glasses, and then said, "Let me pour for you." Something in my expression must have shown her I was feeling overwhelmed. She finished pouring and just looked at me, concern in her eyes. "It's a lot, isn't it?" I took a long sip and nodded, unsure of what to say. She pressed her lips together and said, "Look, Ryan, clearly this is something I want to do for you. I want to make new memories together, just the 2 of us. Experiences that are ours alone. Do you see what I mean?" I nodded again, and then thought I should say something. "So what's the plan? Is there one?" Deanna took a drink herself and then smiled playfully. "Of course. Tonight we're going to the LAX nightclub at the Luxor. It's at the top of the pyramid with amazing views. You'll love it." I raised my hand, ready to protest, but she interrupted me. "I know nightclubs aren't your favorite, but trust me, tonight will be unforgettable. Just go with it, please. I want this to be special for us." She asked me to trust her, and I did. But then again, I hesitated. This was confusing. I sat there looking at her. Finally, I shrugged. What did I have to lose? I took another drink to hide the fact that I was actually concerned, and I wondered why. We sat for another hour, and I managed to finish 3 more beers. I was tired and ready for bed after the 3 drinks I had on the plane. Deanna understood and led us back to the hotel room. I collapsed onto the bed and slept for 3 hours. When I woke up, it was dark outside, and I could hear Deanna humming in the other room. For a moment, I thought back to 18 months ago. Deanna used to hum when she was getting ready for something important. It meant she was happy and in control. She often hummed songs from the 80s, like ones from Journey. Now, I recognized the tune as The Final Countdown. I let out a big yawn and sat up in bed. I was still in my clothes, feeling sticky from the long travel and too much beer. Luckily, my head felt clear. There was a knock on the door, and Deanna peeked in. "Come on, sleepyhead. We have dinner and then we're going out. It's just after 9. Take a shower, shave, and put on some clothes. Paula packed some things for you." Then she closed the door and I got out of bed, stretching my limbs. I walked over to my suitcase to see what Paula had chosen for me to wear. Fortunately, she had done well. I found a black button-up shirt, black pants, shoes, socks, and my best underwear. There was also a black tux jacket I had bought as a joke but ended up liking. I took a shower and noticed the lovely scent of perfume in the air. It looked like Deanna had already used the shower and her things were laid out neatly. After getting dressed, I realized I needed to get back to exercising. I walked into the living area of the suite and stopped in surprise. Deanna was there, but she looked different from any time I had seen her before. Her hair was long and shiny, styled to add more volume. It wasn't quite the big hair from the 80s, but it was definitely inspired by it. Her makeup was perfect, even more stylish than usual. She wore bright red lipstick, some blush, and eyeshadow, with well-groomed eyebrows. Long earrings and a choker completed her look. She turned and asked, "Do you like it?" The dress was stunning. It was short and fit tightly at the hips, reaching down to mid-thigh. The front was cut low, and while it gathered on the sides to keep things modest, I knew that if she moved, it could reveal more than intended. The dress was white, suggesting she wasn't wearing much underneath, and she had on white thigh-high stockings. She noticed where I was looking and playfully adjusted her dress. You couldn't wear garters with this dress because it was too tight in the thigh and would show. I noticed she was wearing a pendant. It was long and hung right between her breasts, with something small and shiny on it to grab attention. She also had on white high heels. I honestly didn't know what to say. She looked like someone from a classy magazine. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. "Okay," she said. "I can see this is a surprise for you. Here's the deal. I want to make new memories with you, but I've discovered something new about myself. We've never talked about it, but we should. I don't know how much you know about what happened, but I found that I enjoy interesting situations." She waited for my response. It was clear she didn't feel comfortable, and my reaction could change everything for her. But I respected her for going there. "Yeah, I was aware," I replied. She looked down, embarrassed. "Well, whatever the circumstances, it's part of me now, and I want us to explore this together. I'm really sorry we didn't find this out together. I'll carry that shame forever, but it's part of my life, and you deserve to be a part of it." She trailed off. I got up, filled a glass with water, and took big gulps. Drinking early helps me feel better, and it gave me something to do while I tried to process everything. I knew this day might come. Deanna had been making her feelings clear, so I figured this was where it was heading. But knowing it was coming didn't prepare me for the idea of reconnecting with my ex-wife after everything that happened. There's no guidebook for that. I motioned for Deanna to sit down. She glanced at her watch, looking worried. "We have reservations at the Camelot Steakhouse in half an hour." "Deanna," I said firmly, "sit down." She sat, her anxiety clear. "Look, Deanna, this is moving really fast. I gestured at her outfit, this place, your expectations. You never asked what I want. You seem to think that I'll just jump back into things without question. I'm honestly not sure. You act like we can just dive back in and it'll all be fine." "Hush," Deanna said gently, leaning in and putting her fingers on my lips. She smiled at me in a real way, rather than the forced smiles she often gave lately. "It's okay. I know this is happening quickly. I'm not sure how to handle this situation. You haven't given me much feedback, you know?" I just looked at her. "I understand. You might not know how you feel right now. I know I've made some big mistakes, and we haven't really talked about them. The tricky part is, I don't know how to start that conversation. Besides saying sorry over and over, I'm lost for words. I figured I should show you instead of just talking. This is my way of trying to demonstrate how I feel. I want to be with you and no one else. I know that what I did hurt you a lot, and I can't say sorry enough. I'm not just sorry because I got caught, but because I did it. I let down everything that matters to me, thinking it wouldn't affect me, but I've learned that's never true." She paused and looked down. "I'm not sure what to do next. I want to show you that you are the most important person to me. All I want is you and to get our life back. I have some changes in me, and I need to weave that into our new relationship. Can you meet me halfway?" I was silent, thinking about our past together and the pain I felt. Then I remembered what Solomon said about my recent struggles. I realized I couldn't feel more hurt than I already have. "All right, let's give this a try. If it gets too much, I can stop, okay? But sure, let's take a chance." Deanna's smile lit up her whole face. It was the kind of smile a wife gives her husband when she's truly happy, the one that feels special. "You won't regret this," she said softly. "But the outfit, that's a bit much, isn't it?" I asked, trying to be gentle. "Oh, this? It's about you. I want to have fun and tease others, but it's all for you. We're in Vegas, away from anyone we know. I can wear this without worrying about what others think. It's about having a good time, and I want you to feel as excited for me as I feel for you by the end of the night. Just a heads up that there might be a little showing, okay?" So we went out. People turned to look at us wherever we went. At dinner, instead of sitting opposite each other, she wanted us to sit side by side. Not long after sitting down, she was touching me, and I reached under her dress, surprised to find she wasn't wearing anything. She leaned forward a bit, as if daring something to happen. I looked around and noticed several people watching us, seemingly hoping for something more. Some of them were women, too. I made eye contact with one guy, and he gave me a thumbs up and nodded at Deanna. Then he sighed dramatically. His wife, sitting across from him, looked around, noticed Deanna, and then turned back to him. I decided not to look over there again. I was sure he wouldn't be having a good night. At one point, Deanna playfully touched her fingers and then smiled at me, whispering, "Well, I might taste like seafood, but I think I taste better. Want to try?" She offered me her fingers, and I must admit, I did give in. I enjoyed it more than I expected. As we were leaving the steakhouse, we bumped into a group of younger women, all dressed up in outfits that were similar to Deanna's, though a bit less flashy. I didn't see any men around and wondered what was happening until I realized the restaurant was right next to a venue called Thunder from Down Under. It wasn't, as I joked to Deanna, a comedy show, but more like a dance show for women. Honestly, it was a bit much for me. Just odd to see so many guys showing off like that, but of course I wasn't hypocritical about it. Most guys would agree with me. I was happy to see Deanna catching some envious glances from that crowd. One woman even came up to ask her where she got her dress. I was curious about that myself. We played craps for about 20 minutes after dinner. Deanna, trying to get attention, left for a moment and returned, excitedly wanting to rub the dice before I rolled them. She was grinning and winking at me the whole time. I had a feeling she had done something clever while she was away. We had been married for years, and I had never seen this side of her before. It made me wonder what else she had been up to in the past year and a half. Her diaries told one story, but this was surprising. Then it was time for the nightclub. By the time we got there, it was almost midnight, and we had paid a good amount to get in. The doorman's eyes widened when he saw what Deanna was wearing. The view from the club was amazing, though the view right next to me was pretty impressive too. It felt strange to be there with the woman who had given me children and shared many experiences together, yet she was dressed and acting in a way I never imagined. It was a thrilling experience, and I didn't want to leave, even if others tried to persuade me. Guys approached Deanna, even with me standing right beside her. One man wanted to dance with her, and she simply said, "No." He lingered nearby until I had to explain what stalking meant and gave a signal to the bouncers. When I stepped away briefly, I returned to find a couple trying to engage her in conversation. She laughed and sipped her drink, appearing genuinely interested in their friendly approach. When I came back, I simply stepped between her and the other guy, making it clear I was with her. Deanna was quick to play along, wrapping her arms around me and saying, "Glad you're back, honey. We have unfinished business." It was a warm moment. Apart from that, most people kept a respectful distance, though she was certainly drawing attention. She danced freely, and her dress skirt moved with her, giving small glimpses of her style and confidence. Her energy was electric, and I could feel the curious glances around us. There was a range of expressions, from admiration to curiosity, all wondering about the connection between us. After a few drinks, I relaxed and enjoyed the moment. Deanna's lively spirit was infectious, and it was refreshing to be around someone so carefree. I couldn't help but think of how surprised our friend Solomon would be if he saw us. There was a brief moment when the bouncer gave us a knowing look, signaling for us to keep things in check. Deanna just laughed, leaning in close and whispering that she was ready to call it a night and head somewhere quieter. We decided to leave and took the elevator down to the main floor. The elevator ride felt like an adventure in itself, and by the time we reached the lobby, we were laughing and in good spirits, both of us caught up in the fun of the evening. The doors opened, and we stepped out, ready to continue the night with a smile. I've seen something about Mary, and I wanted to avoid that kind of mix-up. We headed straight to the other bank of elevators that went to the rooms and took it up to the 34th floor. Once we arrived, the energy between us was high as we both felt caught up in the moment. Feeling a rush of excitement, I quickly took out my phone and snapped a picture of her. She was slightly disheveled, with a big, joyful smile. I sent the picture to my email, knowing it would be easier to retrieve later. We stumbled into our room, and the night continued to unfold in ways we hadn't experienced in years. The mood was light, and we both shared laughs as we opened the curtains to take in the view, feeling free with no one watching from outside. The connection we shared felt natural and fun, and the time flew by as we talked and enjoyed each other's company. As the night went on, we explored different ways to be close, bringing new energy to our time together. The joy and laughter from that evening left an impression, one that reminded us both of the importance of reconnecting and letting go. It was a memorable night, and by the time the sun began to rise, we were both ready for some well-deserved rest. I didn't kiss her afterward. I have my limits. I know some guys enjoy that, but it's a boundary for me. We slept for about 4 hours, and I woke up to her being very affectionate, which had never happened before. I didn't expect it to happen again, but at least I could check that off my list. She was enthusiastic, stopping only to look me in the eye and say, "Are you up for round 3?" before diving back in. My body surprised me, showing no signs of hesitation. I challenge anyone not to react that way when waking up to someone so charming. So, we had another moment together. This time, we took it slower. I figured she might be getting tired, just as I was starting to feel a bit sore myself. It was nice to focus on each other. She wanted to try by the windows, but the angles made that impossible. In the end, I found myself resting after we finished. I had to get up and stretch, feeling a bit cramped in my thigh. When I looked back, she was smiling and seemed happy. She said, "I've missed you and learning all this with you." I just smiled back and replied, "Happy to help." The next day, we barely left our room. We slept in, ordered brunch, then went to the roller coaster and back to relax at a bar, enjoying ourselves for another evening. That Saturday night, we enjoyed a lovely dinner at a French restaurant. Later, we had some cognac and a cigar in the lounge, pretending to be fancy and watching the people around us. Luckily, Deanna felt more like a sophisticated woman that night. I don't think I could handle another wild night like before. We did talk about our dreams and desires. "So, we talked about this before when we were together," Deanna said after a sip of her drink. "Sorry about that. Anyway, what about now? After last night? Did it change how you see me?" I thought carefully about my answer while enjoying my drink and cigar. I was trying to act more mature. I could see that she seemed a bit uncertain. I don't think it changed much. It added something for sure. A new layer, maybe, but I already knew it was there. She looked away, lost in thought. After a minute, she asked softly, "So, where do you think we are now? We've gotten back on that horse, so to speak. What are you thinking?" I can never tell anymore. I smiled slightly and replied, "It's become a habit. I was hurt before, and I don't show it as easily now." She nodded and said, "Yeah, the therapist mentioned that could happen after my—" She paused and finished with, "incident." "Look, I don't really know, Deanna. Last night was, well, great. There's no doubt about that. But we have bigger problems. Our car is still badly damaged. One fun night doesn't fix that." Deanna's expression changed, and she muttered, "I guess you wanted to say that." "I'm not saying there's no future, Deanna," I said gently, putting my glass down and leaning closer. "But I don't think trust can be rebuilt overnight, you know?" Deanna hugged her knee and rested her chin on it. "I know. I understood that from the beginning. I just want to give you a reason to try, to want to try," she said, still looking away. "I understand, Deanna, but after everything that happened, can you blame me for being a little cautious? I'm here, aren't I? We're doing this together. Some might have thought we wouldn't even be in this situation, sharing drinks. I'm one of those people." Deanna sighed. "I know. You're right. It's just so tough. We've been apart for a long time, and I've thought about you a lot. I just want everything to be okay, you know?" She paused, then smiled and said, "But you're right. I shouldn't rush it. We've already achieved more than I expected. The girls said we need to rethink our relationship. What we had is gone, and we need to build something new. I'm trying. I hope you see that?" I smiled, took a small sip from my glass, and said, "I do." "Good," she replied. "So, are you going to try too?" And that was the big question, wasn't it? The question came in that way that women have when they already know something but still want to hear you say it. Deanna blushed and stammered, "It was. Pretty great, actually. He went along with it. I honestly didn't know if he would, but he did. And wow, I felt alive, you know?" "Better than that other guy?" asked Rhonda straightforwardly. Deanna looked at her, pausing to think. It was a fair question. "Oh, definitely. That was all about figuring things out. This time it was about knowing what I want. We tried some other things, too. Your idea about dressing up, Rhonda? I think it was really surprising for me, and it made him pay attention. Honestly, it felt a bit wild, and I liked it. Sure, I can't be like that all the time, but once in a while, when nobody knows me, I could be up for that. It definitely got me excited for Ryan." They were sitting in the coffee shop as usual, each with their lattes, and Trey was hanging back a bit. It was clear he wasn't thrilled to be there, but he was definitely listening. Only May noticed Trey flinch when Deanna shared her news about her night. We spent all night together. Honestly, it was some of the best time I've had. And then again the next day. I'm still feeling it, to be honest, girls. Oh, sorry, Trey, she said, noticing his discomfort. Is this talk a bit too much for you, Trey? Asked Rhonda with a grin. Trey just glanced at her and looked away, unsure how to reply. All right, you had a night together and showed him a new side of you. What did you think? Asked May, leaning in, curious. I really don't know, May. I just can't tell. Yeah, he seemed into it. He hasn't been involved with anyone in a long time, and it was really special. I asked him how he felt, and he just changed the subject. I thought I'd get more clarity with how well we know each other. Working for him these last 2 weeks, he's much more closed off than before. I still don't really know where we stand, but he hasn't shut me out, and we have plans for dinner. It's just so frustrating, you know. I thought I'd be further along by now. Gina placed her hand on Deanna's arm and said, Hang in there, girl. It's been a couple of months. It takes a while for things to heal for a guy. You know what you want, but he has to find his way there on his own. I know, Gina. I just want this to be settled. I want us to move forward. You really are all about getting things done, aren't you? Trey suddenly said. I'm sorry? Deanna replied, confused. Well, it seems like it's all about finishing tasks for you. It's not just about how he feels, it's about, here's task A, this is what I want, and how do I make it happen with you? Maybe that's the issue? You're treating this like a checklist, but it's not like that. It takes time, it takes effort. You have to show him you can be trusted. It's not just about big gestures, it's about being there every day and doing the little things. You seem like you just want to get it over with and move on, but it doesn't work that way. There was silence after his words, and Deanna looked frantically at the other women. Is he right? Am I handling this all wrong? The other girls looked at each other before May thoughtfully said, Well, he could be, but what else can you do? You made it clear that you don't expect to be completely forgiven, right? And you know trust takes time to rebuild, yes? Deanna nodded at May, her eyes close to tears. Rhonda got up and sat on the arm of Deanna's chair, gently rubbing her arms. Look, I didn't mean to bring everyone down. I'm just trying to be realistic here. You did something pretty serious, Deanna. It's not going to be okay right away. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try or that what you're doing is wrong. It's just that your hopes might be a bit too high, Trey said, trying to calm things down. He's right, Deanna. I agree, said Gina, and Rhonda nodded in support. Take it slow. Think about it this way. He hasn't pushed you away. That door is still open and it could easily have been closed. Deanna nodded, feeling a little better. Yeah, I guess. I just want to move forward with my life, you know? I want that close family feeling back. I know, Gina replied. I understand. Hey, after the last thing, maybe this will help. It's a big step after all. Everyone sat in silence for a moment, lost in their thoughts, sipping coffee and looking around. To lighten the mood, May asked, So what's everyone doing tonight? Anyone up for dinner? Can't. I have plans. Rhonda smiled. Gina sighed. I have a lot of stories to grade. I wish I could. Gina was a community college teacher, focusing on English and cultural studies. Trey and I are going to the Insurance Award Ball tonight. It's a charity event. It was the first place we visited when we started dating. It's the least I can do for all the help he's given me. Plus, the food is amazing, Deanna said, her face lighting up. May frowned at that news. Yes, and we should get going if we want to change and get there on time, Trey said, checking his watch and standing up. Everyone stood up at the same time except May. Deanna, can I talk to you for a moment? She asked quietly. Deanna looked at her and then at Trey. Go ahead. I'll be there in a sec. What's up, May? Deanna asked as she sat back down. Are you sure this dinner is a good idea, Deanna? It's just dinner. He needs a date, and I'm going with him. It's not like it's a date, really. I'm just there to keep him company, she chuckled. No, I mean, Trey has been helpful, but think about what Ryan might say if he knew. Knew what? That I'm going to a charity event? It's no big deal, May. He would understand. I did something similar when we were married. Well, once, anyway. We are divorced. He doesn't get to control my life. Deanna was confused by May's concern. I know you're right, Deanna. I just think it could look different to others. Deanna scoffed. It's just a charity event, May. I'm not doing anything wrong. I started down that path once, and no, it's not going to happen again. He's just a friend, a helpful friend. And he deserves my time. Of course, May said again, showing she was uninterested. Have a nice night, Deanna. About a week after I got back from Las Vegas, I was having dinner with Paula. Saffron was at a sleepover, and Jamie was next door. He had swimming lessons and had become quite the swimmer. He spent every moment he wasn't playing video games in the pool next door. The neighbors, Bob and Tommy, a married couple, also had a teenage daughter. She was a great babysitter and a licensed lifeguard. I thought she would be very attractive as she got older, and it seemed like Jamie was a bit taken with her, at least for his age. I couldn't help but smile. He was just like me. He might be adopted, but some things stay in the heart. Anyway, Paula and I had ordered some Giordano's pizza. While we were watching Person of Interest, she made a not-sonic comment about my eating, saying I was being greedy. Then she asked me a surprising question. "So, Dad," she said, taking a big bite of pizza, "if you've ever had Chicago deep dish pizza, you know it's messy. How was Las Vegas? Did you have a wild time with Mom?" She asked it so casually that I nearly choked on my food. Your oldest child should not ask about your personal life, especially when she's a girl and you're her dad. I paused the TV and stared wide-eyed at Paula. She smiled and chewed before continuing. "Come on, Dad. You've been more relaxed since you came back. It was obviously a fun weekend. Just curious about what's happening next." "Well," I said, trying to think of how to reply. "First, don't speak with your mouth full. Second, that's a good question. Honestly, I don't know." "Well, we know what she wants, right?" I nodded, chewing some more. The pizza was too good to ignore. "You know, Paula, we talked a bit about when your mom and I split up. I don't think we've really discussed what you thought about her actions." Paula shrugged and replied, "Well, it was disappointing. She broke our family apart. What she did was really hard to forgive. There's no other way to see it." "Well, I don't know, Paula. She hurt me, not you." "No, Dad, she hurt all of us, this whole family. What she did pulled us apart. How can you say she didn't affect us all?" I frowned at her for her strong words, and she rolled her eyes. "Come on, Dad, I'm 15. It's not like I've never heard that word." The world is big and people are always moving through it. Just accept that. But really, what she did was wrong. There's no better way to say it. Should you forgive her? That's really up to you, from my perspective. Well, she is Mom. It would be nice if we could be a family again, even if trust is hard to rebuild. I was surprised to hear this from Paula. She was speaking so calmly, as if talking about schoolwork. What shocked me more was that she didn't try to convince me to forgive her at all. She was just being straightforward. Okay then, I replied, not sure what else to say. I looked at her, uncertain if I agreed with what she was saying. It all felt too simple and fit too neatly into my own feelings. There was no need to worry. We definitely had better times together. You have to admit that the trip to Minnesota felt like old times, right? And let's be real, Dad. You haven't always been perfect during this, either. What? I said, my piece of pizza halfway to my mouth and now forgotten. Oh, come on, Dad. Do you really think you could mess around with that video screen at the ball game and we wouldn't feel the effects? I could have done without that. So could Saffron. I had to handle multiple situations at school because of it, and I know Saffron faced her own troubles. Everyone knew what happened. We had to deal with it. I'm glad you took your chance to get back at Mom, but you didn't think about us at all, did you? So yeah, we could have lived without that. So don't act like you're perfect, Dad. You're not. Then she went back to her pizza. I just stared at her. The worst part was that she was right about everything. I hadn't considered Paula, Saffron, or Jamie when I acted. I was just upset and reacted selfishly. At the time, I felt clever for how I'd made Deanna feel bad, without acknowledging how it affected the people I cared about. Noticing I was quiet, she said, "It's okay, Dad. I figured you hadn't thought about it. Just wanted you to know. It's all fine. I'd rather be here than with Mom because I don't know how I could face her every day without feeling upset. Saffron and Jamie just want us to be a family again in case you care. I'm sorry, Paula. I truly didn't think. You are right, and I apologize." Paula put down her pizza and smiled. Then she moved closer to me. "It's all right, Dad. Really. Everything's sorted out now. If you want Mom back, that's fine with us. I just wanted you to know it feels good to have one parent who understands their promises. I think I can work things out with Mom eventually, and I appreciate having her around. So whatever you decide, we'll support it. Just so you know." At that moment, I really didn't know what to do. I put my arm around Paula, paused the TV, and hoped she wouldn't notice the tears on my face. I needed to think about the kids before making any choices. Then she spoiled the moment by nudging me and playfully asking, "So, was it good then, Dad? Did you clear out the old pipes?" I ended up spitting out my pizza and couldn't stop laughing. It was a Thursday. I remember it clearly. I was trying to figure out how to pay for a quality assurance team to start testing my game. Having friends and family play it was one thing, but having professionals test it was another level. They could find bugs or problems, and that needed skill and money. We had planned some budget for it, but after researching, I realized our budget wasn't enough. I wondered if I could hire just one QA manager and then use students or people from Craigslist to help. Would that work? Or was I being unrealistic? I was on a Skype call with someone I had been talking to when I noticed a man standing over me. It was a surprise. Except for when Deanna was at the front desk for 2 weeks, people usually wandered in looking for someone to talk to. Since the others were likely out at lunch or busy, this guy had found me. My office door was open after all. However, after taking a good look at him, I felt something was wrong. He was breathing hard, with his teeth clenched and his hands tight when I glanced down. The look on his face didn't say friendly. He looked angry. I had no idea why. I wondered if we owed him money. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to smile while deciding if I should stay at my desk or step out. No, he seemed upset. It felt safer to keep some distance, just in case. "You're Ryan, right?" he said, forcing the words out. He was tall, had sandy hair, and the most intense blue eyes I had ever seen. Doing my best to ease the tension, I smiled wider and replied, "Depends. Do we owe you money? If so, no, definitely not. Ryan left for Argentina a year ago. He loves it there and wants to travel around on foot by himself. Something about living off the land. You might want to go look for him there." I was trying hard not to be intimidated or make this guy angrier. He studied me for a few more seconds, and then it seemed like the anger faded. He pursed his lips and dropped into the chair in front of my desk. He kept looking at me, but the aggressive vibe had disappeared. I didn't feel like I was in a tight spot anymore, so that was a relief, even if things weren't friendly. The mystery man took a moment to find his words. Finally, he said, "You know, you're not treating her well." I was surprised again. "Excuse me?" I replied, working to keep my anger down. "Like I said, she does so much for you, and what do? You don't appreciate it." His tone was sharp. Suddenly, everything clicked for me. I realized who he was, Deanna's secret supporter, the one she had mentioned before but never fully explained. I hadn't pushed for details because I wanted to keep my distance. I didn't want to dig into her life beyond what I needed to as a co-parent. It was her choice to talk to me, and I was just watching from the outside. As I thought about this, I wondered, where do we stand now? I sensed that Deanna was curious too. She never asked me directly, and there were no hints that allowed me time to answer, but it was there, hovering in the air. I knew it, yet I avoided thinking about it because I was unsure how to respond. I was good at putting things off. Maybe the Bears would do poorly again this year. Who knows? I tried to speak but couldn't find the words. After a moment, I said, "Are we talking about Deanna? Just to make sure I understand?" He nodded, staring at one of those silly desk toys I had magnetic balls shaped like a spiral. "So, you are her friend then? Her advisor?" Another nod, but he still wouldn't look at me. "Can I ask why you are here? What's your interest in this?" At that, he looked up, his eyes fierce for a moment. "Because someone needs to tell you the truth about her." I leaned back, thinking hard about his role in all of this. He must have seen the realization on my face because his intense gaze softened. "You care about her." I said this softly, almost gently. He leaned in, hands together, staring at another toy on my desk. "Look, I know she's really into you. You're all she talks about. There's no room for anyone else in her life, but she's still there for you." He looked at me, and I could see there was a lot going on in his mind. "You said she needed to figure out how to make things right with you. Well, here she is focused on that. She has a plan and she is determined to follow it." I rubbed my face, feeling the roughness of the day on my skin. "So, what do we do about this?" I asked, thinking it over. He replied, despite my indirect question, "Someone needs to make it clear to you. You're acting like it's not serious. She's waiting for you, for a sign of forgiveness. She can't move on until you do, but she won't ask for it. She feels she doesn't deserve it. And you're just sitting there taking everything she offers without really acknowledging it." There's an edge to his words. What you need is for someone to point out how thoughtless you're being. Suddenly, he stood up, his hands clenched at his sides just like when he came in. He shook his head, glared at me, and hurried out the door. I sat there, surprised by everything that just happened. I definitely had some serious thinking to do. I also needed to discover a few things. I had a way in mind to find out more. More sneaking around, though. I thought I was done with all of that. I could have been a spy. Yes, I'd have been great at it. Just like that character from the old show. What would that be now? Some kind of modern tech hidden in my clothes? I really need to focus. And then the guy just walked out, you know? I tried to take another sip of my drink and found my glass was empty. I stared at it, puzzled, because I didn't recall finishing it. With friends like these, you couldn't be sure if you actually drank it all or if someone else helped out. I turned to Simon and Polly, who was still sipping her glass of wine, now warm. I sat on their couch after calling Simon because I needed to talk about what had just happened. He suggested I come over. He said he'd gather some friends so we could figure out this tricky situation. Sometimes his ways of speaking are a bit odd. Anyway, I was there, having arrived, received a drink, and told to share what happened. I had hesitated about waiting for the others, but they insisted I just start talking. They would rather hear it twice than wait. Great. Then the doorbell rang. Simon got up to answer it, and I waved my empty glass at him, hoping he'd bring me another. I looked at Polly, who was now playing with her wine, swirling it around the glass like someone trying to make music. She clearly wasn't very good at it because I couldn't hear anything she was saying. She was nodding as if she understood something and suddenly said, that was helpful. The room became lively as Simon, Jonathan, and Solomon walked in. "I'm here because I was called," Jonathan stated. He always seemed to take cues from romantic comedies. "I brought Solomon with me," he added as I glanced at Solomon. He nodded and took a seat on the couch opposite the coffee table. We were in Simon's living room, which had no TV, just a fireplace and 3 sofas arranged in a U shape around it. "What's up, friend?" Solomon greeted, flipping his head toward me. "Friend is fine," I replied, trying to sound casual. Solomon made a face. "No, really, just don't do that." Simon looked around as Jonathan settled in too. He noticed the empty glass and said, "I'll get more," then walked off with purpose. Solomon saw what Polly was doing with her wine glass. "Hey, Polly, do you know why wine glasses have stems? So you can hold them by the stem and not change the temperature of the wine with your hands. How are you?" Polly stopped her finger's movement and stared at Solomon. After a moment, she responded coolly, "Hello, Solomon, Jonathan." Polly honestly didn't know how to react to Solomon. Jonathan was familiar, but Solomon had ways of talking that puzzled her. Simon came back with bottles of beer. No glasses for us. We all took a long drink, almost together, and sighed at the same time. It was a little awkward. "So, what's going on? Is there an event or what?" Solomon asked, with his usual straightforwardness. "All right, to catch you up." I explained what had happened that day once again. Simon and Polly listened silently for the second time. I found it strange that no one asked questions. I must be a great storyteller, I thought. After I finished, I found myself out of drink again. I held out my glass and said, "More beer, please." I got more, and once Simon was seated again, everyone suddenly began to speak at once. "So this person," Solomon started while Simon cut in with, "What do you think?" Jonathan chimed in with, "I imagine." And Polly said, "This is nonsense." Polly's comment silenced everyone else. They all stared at her. "Well, it is," she said defensively. "I agree," I nodded in support. Obviously, everyone turned their attention back to me. There was a brief silence before Simon hesitantly asked, "Do you think she's again?" Another heavy pause hung in the air as I looked down at my beer. Honestly, I have no idea what to think. Something is definitely happening here. Or maybe she has a really intense admirer, I just don't see it in her eyes, you know? "You didn't see it last time," Jonathan said carefully. I wasn't offended. That's true, I replied. But I wasn't paying attention then. Now I am. You have to believe me. I'm trying so hard to understand. I just can't find anything in her. There are no secrets. She's not hiding anything or avoiding me. I really don't know. This guy could be a stalker for all I know. How do you feel about it? Solomon asked cautiously, leaning back and sipping his beer slowly. Honestly, I'm not happy about it, I started. No, I mean everything. I mean, you've been close, right? Some people made faces at him, but he noticed and said, sorry, made love, using his fingers to make quotation marks. Well, it's not really your business, but yes, that was what Vegas was all about. The dress was definitely stunning, Solomon added casually. Yes, wait, how do you know that? I asked, feeling puzzled. I hadn't told anyone about the dress or shared any photos. Come on, Solomon scoffed. Your email password is way too easy. That picture? It was great, though. Seriously. I was shocked and my eyes widened. You did what? You looked at my email? It's part of my job, Ryan. You should have figured that out by now, Solomon said, taking a sip of his beer like it was no big deal. I stood up angrily. You can't just... My finger trembled as I tried to think of what to say next. Jonathan stood up and gently placed a hand on my shoulder. Ryan, calm down. He's annoying, but you knew that. And that dress really was something. I turned to Jonathan and stared. You've seen it too? Simon said, he sent it to all of us. Sorry about that. At least he had the common decency to look away. I sat down, feeling shaky. I don't know what got into her, man. I can imagine it was something big. Was it good? Solomon asked, genuinely curious, clearly unaware of how upset I was. A gentleman never shares that, I tried to say confidently, but failed. Are there any gentlemen here? I don't think I've ever met one, Polly replied sarcastically, looking around at the guys. Thanks for that, I said with a hint of sarcasm. It was good. Interesting. I was involved in her new interests. Ooh, was it public? Tell us more, Simon exclaimed before Polly elbowed him in the side. Seriously, though, what do you think about all this? If she's with this guy, do you care? Is there something new happening? Are you trying to fix your marriage? What are your thoughts? Is it time to move on or what? That was the big question I had been thinking about during the drive to Simon's house. I have. No idea. That's the problem. The last few weeks have been great. We've reconnected as a family and been close, but I can't. I just don't... I'm not sure what I'm feeling right now. So many emotions are mixing together. Being with her is easy, you know? It's like a warm, cozy coat. I know it well, and it knows me. It feels safe, just like it protects me from the rain. We paused for a moment. So, what do we do next? Jonathan asked. We need more information, I guess, I replied. Jonathan let out a surprised snort. Maybe we should start our own private detective agency. We do a lot of this work already. How are you going to manage that? Simon asked. I have an idea. I was sitting in the corner sipping my large apple spice cider at Starbucks. I don't understand why they use fancy Italian words for cup sizes instead of simple ones like small, medium, or large. It's just silly. I lost my focus while my mind wandered away from the task at hand. I shook off my daydreams and looked around, trying to find the person I was supposed to meet. I didn't know what she looked like, but I figured she'd be looking for me. Well, technically not me. I had stretched the truth a little. Yeah, I didn't tell the whole truth, but that was necessary. I knew she was older and that she'd be sitting in the soft chairs in the middle of the Starbucks. If she was on time, she should be here by now. I stood up and started to walk around, and then I saw her. It was definitely her, sitting with a coffee, looking around at everyone, her gaze lingering on the women in their 30s. She had even left the other chair empty for me, which was thoughtful. I sat down, hoping not to spill my drink. She looked at me and shook her head, saying with a frown, I hope you don't mind, but I was saving that seat for a friend. She's not coming, I'm afraid, May. I'm sorry to bring you here under false pretenses, but I didn't know how else to do it. I'm Ryan, by the way. I'm sure you've heard of me. She blinked, took a sip, and then said carefully, I see. I doubt you do, May, but I'm here to talk to you, just you. It took me a while to find your group through ads, but thankfully Deanna has been very open about it. She repeated, I see, and smiled a little nervously. I'm not here to complain about anything, and I think what you all do is important. I really just need to talk to you alone. That's why I wanted it to be just you. I didn't know how else to handle it. May sat back, looking at me over her bifocals. Well, you could have just asked. I have to say I'm not a fan of your approach, but we're here now. What do you want to discuss? How can I help, Ryan? I could feel her studying me. You don't become a good salesman without noticing certain expressions often. I felt okay. There was nothing I needed to hide. I hoped. Well, I just need to find out some things. Deanna has been very open about you all and what she's been doing with you. She's been truthful. I couldn't help adding, now. I know about the planning and the things you all arranged for me. Thanks for Vegas. That was a nice surprise. I think we both needed it. I was happy to see May blush a little and show a shy, playful smile. It was surprising to see that from someone like May who was older, but I realized she was part of this group too. She must have a past, so she probably understood complex feelings. But while I appreciate all your help for Deanna, I have some questions that she can't answer because she may not understand why I'm asking. As soon as I said this, May's smile faded. She looked more guarded, which told me she knew something and didn't want to share. That meant there was something important to discover. I sighed internally. Whatever May thought she knew was something I needed to learn. I had to find a way to get her to tell me. Should I go for a quick story or the truth? I decided on the truth. I figured it was the better choice anyway. Look, May, here's the thing. A man visited me the other day and had a lot to say about Deanna. Her expression changed, and she looked even more cautious. I had struck a nerve. Honestly, I don't know where Deanna and I stand. I'm being truthful because it seems like Deanna has been honest too, and I want to give you the same respect. The truth is, I'm not fully committed to this new relationship, and I don't know why. But I think you might understand. I need your help to figure out what's bothering me and what I should do. Will you help me, please? May sat there, staring at me. I could only imagine what thoughts were racing through her mind. Finally, she hesitated and began to speak. I poured myself a glass of Jameson and wondered what I should do next. I had returned home about an hour earlier to Paula's annoyance. "Where have you been? What are we doing for dinner? Don't you care about us at all?" she exclaimed, her voice rising at the end. Eventually, I calmed her down with a promise of pizza. It seemed like we had that a lot lately. Who was I kidding? After we ate, I somehow lit a fire in the fireplace. The house I bought had a fireplace, and Jamie was getting really into it. He and Saffron were curious about how to make a fire that would light easily, and what was needed for it. He even offered to clean it out the next morning, which was nice because I really didn't like doing that. He enjoyed both water and fire activities, which made things a bit complicated. I was not quite sure why he wanted to help, but I appreciated the offer to clean. So I sat and watched the flames, thinking about what to do next. Since I hadn't put the kids to bed yet and really wanted some quiet time to think, the little rascals were making it hard for me. They were running around, then I heard a scream and some light crying. I paused to see what Paula would do, and then I realized she was in her room with headphones on. That was smart. Just then, 2 kids burst in yelling, "Daddy! Daddy!" at the top of their lungs. They both tried to tell me how terrible the other was being, speaking over one another, which made their voices even louder. It was too overwhelming. "Stop!" I shouted, maybe a bit too loudly. Just because I felt lost didn't mean I could stop being a good dad or be harsh. "Sorry, kids," I said to the 2 wide-eyed children before me. "I can't hear when you both talk at once. What's going on?" Jamie jumped right into a long complaint about Saffron, saying she was mean and would not share her toys. He talked a lot without giving any real details, which usually meant he was in trouble but didn't want to admit it, so he needed something to say about his sister to cover up his own actions. When he finally stopped, Saffron simply said, "He pushed me down, Daddy. It hurt. I have a scrape on my leg. And he wouldn't say sorry, so I can't forgive him." She looked at Jamie and said, "Those are the rules. You have to say sorry so I can forgive you. Then we can play." Jamie mumbled, "Sorry," in a low voice, and suddenly, everything clicked in my mind. I understood what had been happening in the past few months, what it meant, and why I was acting the way I was. I realized what I needed to do, and why. In that moment, everything became clear. I had never experienced that before, but it happened. I knew what steps I needed to take next to move forward, both with Deanna and my life overall. Now I just had to act on it. Happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Trey, happy birthday to you. Deanna smiled as the singing faded and the waitstaff returned to their tasks. They were at Morton's Steakhouse in Rosemont, having just enjoyed a delicious steak together. The staff had brought out a cupcake with a candle and sang to Trey, who was sitting across from Deanna, looking embarrassed. He smiled a forced smile, the kind people wear when they wish they could disappear, yet they try to appear grateful for what's happening. With a sigh as the waitstaff left, he said to Deanna, "Seriously? I'm not a kid anymore." "I know," she replied, using that tone some women have when they talk down to others. "But you need to have the full experience." "Thanks. Can we leave now?" "No, not until you've eaten your cupcake. Plus, I have a little something for you." "Deanna," Trey said, clearly annoyed. "Here, just be grateful." She pulled a small, brightly wrapped gift from her bag and handed it to him. "Go on, open it." Trey hesitated, wanting to complain again, but stopped when he saw the look on Deanna's face. When he opened the gift, he found a shiny 42mm Apple Watch with a steel band. "Wow," Trey said. "These things are expensive. What's going on here, Deanna?" Deanna smiled warmly at him and said, "The advice you've given me? Totally worth it. It's been really nice spending time with you. Just wanted to give you a little thank you. I saw you have an iPhone but that old watch, so I thought you might like this." Suddenly she moved her chair, got up, walked around the table and gave him a quick kiss on the lips before pulling back to look into his eyes. "Thank you, Trey, and happy birthday." 2 weeks later, it was a Wednesday. The sun was shining, which was a nice change. I remember it clearly. I thought about whether to bring an umbrella since it had been cloudy earlier. But by noon, the sky was clear. I don't know why I'm thinking about the weather. It's a silly thing to focus on. I hadn't seen much of Deanna lately, just a few dinners and one Saturday playing frisbee golf. She mentioned she'd been busy with work. At 1 p.m., Deanna popped her head into my office and said, "Come on, we have to go." I thought, what is happening? But I couldn't actually say that out loud. I looked at her, confused, and she said, "You're the boss, remember? And you haven't hired anyone to help me. Do I need to find someone for you?" I found my voice and asked, "Why am I leaving?" "You have an afternoon appointment. With me. Let's go, we don't have a lot of time." Where are we going?" "It's a surprise." "I don't like surprises." "You'll enjoy this one. Come on, be the boss. Take the afternoon off. Have some fun." Remembering the last surprise led us to Las Vegas. I still smiled at that memory. I thought, why not? I was only facing an afternoon of discussions with some contractors. I stopped by to let the guys know I was leaving early. They nodded, and then I felt like I was invisible to them. Deke and Kevin really get focused on what they're doing. When I went outside, I spotted Deanna by a shiny white Tesla. I could hardly believe my eyes. "This isn't yours, is it?" I asked, admiring the car. "No," she laughed. "It's my boss's. I convinced her to let me borrow it, but I have to return it by 8. Come on, get in." She guided me to the back door and opened it for me. I looked at her, unsure. "Come on, your ride is ready. And no, you can't drive it. It took me a lot to get permission to drive. If you knew how much I had to do to get her to agree. Let's just say I'll have to lend some clothes to a friend for a while." I climbed in, curious about the ride ahead. I always wanted to drive one of these. It felt like being on a rocket. The car took off so quickly. Deanna usually liked to speed, but this time it felt like she had superpowers with how fast it shot forward. It was so quiet and smooth. The dashboard looked like something from a sci-fi movie. I expected her to call for help with more power or warn about something dangerous nearby. It was amazing. She chatted non-stop while driving. It felt strange to sit in the back while my wife drove a car I really wanted to take for a spin myself. My life often feels like a puzzle that doesn't fit together. We drove into the city on the highway, then took a turn onto another road, passing the toll booths. I kept trying to figure out where we were headed, but Deanna playfully kept me guessing. She dropped hints, and whenever I thought I solved her clues, she'd shout, "No! Try again!" with hints that led me in the wrong direction. Eventually, I noticed we were downtown, heading north past familiar places. I remembered a time when I worked out near here before I met Deanna. A strange encounter happened in the showers back then, which made me leave in a hurry. I started feeling uneasy when we passed certain streets, and my heart raced as we approached a well-known spot. There it was, on the corner of Addison and Clark. The famous address, 1060 West Addison, known from a classic movie. Wrigley Field was the home of the Chicago Cubs. It was named because the Cubs were thought to be similar to the Chicago Bears, but in baseball. This was where it all began for me. I had been told to watch a baseball game, the city rivalry game, and my wife Deanna appeared on the screen with someone else, touching each other. I really didn't want to be there and wished I could forget those memories. Deanna looked back at me and noticed my expression. "Ryan," she said calmly, "please, I need to finish this. I have to complete the tasks. This is the last one. If you ever trusted me, if our time together mattered, please let me do this. It's important for both of us. Just trust me." "What exactly do you need to do, Deanna?" I asked. "Just wait a little longer and you'll see." I really wished I was anywhere else. I had a feeling about what she was doing, and I wasn't on board with it. Not at all. But I could tell that she was determined. After thinking it over, I decided to go along. I felt she deserved a little bit of trust from me. "Okay, but here are my conditions. If I feel uncomfortable at any moment, I'm leaving, all right?" Deanna smiled at me through the rearview mirror as we pulled into the parking lot. I noticed the parking fee was enormous, $40. I thought to myself that for that price, I should be getting a hotel room. She said, "Thanks, honey. Trust me, it's going to be okay. You'll see." We parked and remembered where we left the car. We went into the stadium and found great seats right behind the infield on the home side. We got our beers and hot dogs because you have to have those at a baseball game in America, especially at Wrigley Field. The game was against the Cleveland Indians, and it felt slow, which is how I usually found baseball games. While many people appreciated the strategy involved, I always found them a bit boring. That's why team sports weren't really my thing. Yet it was a sunny day, we had our drinks and snacks, and I was with Deanna, who I knew had feelings for me still. It felt strange to be at the place where our lives had turned upside down because of her choices and my decisions to reveal them. I had not been to Wrigley Field in a long time, so it felt odd to be there after everything that had happened. I thought there were two possible outcomes. Either she would lead me into another difficult situation, or something else would happen at the bottom of the fifth inning. As the teams switched sides, ads and little animations appeared on the electronic billboards. Then, there it was, the unexpected message. On the huge jumbotron, there was Deanna, looking down at me from 60 feet up. The real Deanna held my hand tightly. "Hello, everyone," the large version of Deanna said as the crowd quieted. "Some of you might recognize me. A couple of years ago, my husband found out I had been unfaithful at one of these games. Someone hacked the display systems and showed my face along with that of the other person. The whole world saw my mistake. Now I'm here to apologize to my husband on this big screen where my shame was shown. I hurt you and our family, and I regret my actions. I have no excuse. I ask for your forgiveness. You are the only one I've ever truly loved. Please, forgive me." The crowd erupted into cheers and applause, with some people even standing up. I thought they would put the camera on us, but luckily they did not. If they had, and I said no, it might have turned ugly. About 30 seconds later, someone recognized Deanna and then me, and people began turning around, filming us with their phones. Deanna looked at me with a brave smile, though I could see her nerves. "Are you okay?" she shouted over the noise. I nodded sympathetically and shouted back, "Can we go somewhere to talk, just the two of us?" She smiled wider and nodded, so we got up and tossed our trash in the bin on our way out. Since we left early, we easily got out of the parking lot, and the traffic was light. We ended up at a bar called Irish Eyes on Lincoln. It was an old place that Deanna used to visit. She had dated the bartender there, but he was not a good person and often hurt her, so she had moved on from him. It was a bit ironic given our upcoming conversation. With another beer in front of me and a Diet Coke for her since she was driving, it was time for the discussion we had both been putting off. "So now you know why you had to trust me. It was something I needed to do," Deanna said. "I understand, Deanna, really. But I don't know how you managed to get through to them. That manager at Wrigley Field was really mad at me. How did you pull it off?" She shrugged. To start, I made a $5,000 donation to the Cubs on the Move charity, and I also had to arrange for some models I work with to attend a party they're planning later this year. It's routine for me. When you bring enough cheerful faces to a problem, it generally gets resolved. Wow, $5,000? That's quite a lot. Well, she said, taking my hand across the table, I felt it was necessary. I told you about the tasks I set for myself, hoping you would try to trust me. There were the diaries, our family playing frisbee golf, me helping you with work, our trip to Vegas, and finally this. I wanted to reach you from every angle. The last task was about showing my vulnerability in front of others. It needed to be significant to make sure you understood, and it felt right. We both took a sip of our drinks, and then she asked the big question. So, how am I doing? What happens next for us, Ryan? I thought for a moment, then held her hands and said what I needed to say. Deanna, I appreciate everything you've done. It's honestly been remarkable. The strength you've shown is impressive. I should be surprised by this, and in some ways I am, but I also see it clearly. You are the person I always believed you to be. Now came the difficult part. But there isn't a future for us. I said it plainly. I heard her sharp breath and felt her grip tighten on my hands. What? But, Deanna, please, let me explain. There's no future for us, but there is a future for you. I don't. She shook her head and withdrew her hands. Please, take a moment, Deanna. Let me explain. She took a drink, calming herself as I continued. The truth is, I've been holding back, and you know this. You've been careful not to push me too hard. Even in your message, you asked for my forgiveness, not to take you back. That says a lot. But this is what it really is about. You think this is about rebuilding trust so we can return to the way things were. But that life is over. It was broken beyond repair. I won't dwell on the past. We both know it's gone. There's no ideal life to return to. Deanna looked down and said softly, I know. Then she looked up and said with more strength, but the therapist, James, said we could create a new relationship. A different one, not the same as before. Yes, he told me the same when I visited him those few times. But it's not as easy as that, Deanna. There's more for you to grasp. I took a deep breath and continued. The issue is, I think you've lost sight of why you are doing this. You are so focused on trying to get us back together because that was your instinct during the emotional turmoil when we ended things. I tried to convey it as gently as I could, saying, when I ended things with you, wouldn't have helped anyone right then. You are so focused on how to get us back to where we were, with me wanting to trust you. You haven't really considered if that's what I want, or even if that's what you want. You think you do because you had a life you loved, even if it wasn't enough to stop you from making mistakes. The truth is, both of us have moved on. You have your little support group, your job, and a life. You've made the best of what you have, and that's great. You've grown and become more than you were, and I'm truly impressed and proud of you. I took a deep breath. And then there's Trey. She looked confused. What about Trey? I told you about him. He's my secret weapon. No, Deanna, he's your secret crush. What? She exclaimed. No, he isn't. How can you think that? How can I think that? Deanna, how many dinners have you had with him in the past 2 months? I could see her trying to figure it out, desperately trying to prove me wrong. Finally, she came up with an answer. About 15, I think. Give or take a few. Right. 15. How many times have we had dinner? She went pale when I asked. While counting up her dinners with Trey, I could tell she knew the answer. About 10, she murmured quietly. Right, 10. So that's 1/3 less with me. But we didn't do anything like that, Ryan. You have to believe me. It was just friends. She spoke quickly, anxiously. Oh, I'm sure it was, in your eyes. But Trey came to see me a few weeks ago. I've been thinking about how to handle this for a while. Today's talk really brought everything to light, you know. What? She said, surprised again. Yeah, he came to my office. He had a few words about me not being grateful for what you had been doing for me. He is completely in love with you, Deanna. Can't you see that? She stared at the table, her face showing the shock when she realized a truth she hadn't seen before. In love? With me? She whispered. Oh, yes. And I think you feel more than just friendship for him, too. She looked at me sharply. No, he's just a friend. He's been very helpful. A friend you went to a charity dinner with, right? At $500 a plate. You never even asked me, Deanna. I was just trying to be nice. Our first date was at the dinner the year before. Our first date? Really, Deanna? If that was your first date, what about that evening you spent all dressed up dancing all night? I didn't mean to upset her, but I needed her to understand. She realized the truth. Deanna, I said softly, I'm not mad. I'm not angry. The truth is, I've held myself back from everything a lot. I didn't understand why, but it was because I was scared of getting hurt again. I needed to protect myself, and it seems I was right to do so. Honestly, I'm not even that upset with you. I think you might not realize what you've been doing or how you really feel. You've been so focused on this list of things to do that you haven't thought about your life beyond it. I paused and took a drink. I was really thirsty. Talking a lot is tiring. So is dealing with this whole situation. I believe you thought you were doing everything you claimed. I don't think anything serious happened with him. I understand you were focused on us, but there's more to it than just physical matters. Last time it was all about physical stuff, right? No feelings involved? This time it's all about feelings and not physical stuff. I think you would have gotten there in the end. But this time, I also believe you didn't really understand what you were doing, which is why I'm not angry or looking to tear anyone's life apart. I've been there before, but I think you were involved in all of this with me for different reasons than you realize. My simple view is that what you truly need is forgiveness from me. You can't move forward without it. Look at what has happened. Until today at Wrigley, you hadn't even asked me for forgiveness. You talked about it in your video and in your notes, mentioning it several times. You said it was because you didn't think you deserved it. But that wasn't the real reason, was it? What you needed was to feel that you deserved it and for me to give it without you having to ask. Because when that happens, it means something. It is deserved. And that's what you need, and that's what all of this has been about in the end. Today, you realized I was ready to forgive, and your asking for it gave me that chance to offer it. I took another sip. Deanna just sat there and stared at me. Oh, I believe on some level you'd like things to go back to how they were. I would too. But we can't have it back. I could never trust you the same way again, and I'm sorry to say that. That might be more about me than you. I think you are trustworthy now. You've learned from your mistakes, and I believe you would understand the importance of trust now, but I just can't see it. There was a pause, and then she said, all that stuff with Trey. How do you know? I met May. She looked up at me, her expression tense. May told you all those things? Don't blame her, Deanna. She cares about you. She's quite sharp. She notices more than you think. She mentioned how much you talk about me, us, our family. But she also pointed out how much time you're spending with Trey. And when he came to see me and knocked on my desk, well, Deanna, people don't just fall in love by sitting together at the movies. They need a reason to feel that way. You gave him that reason. It showed you were close, and all of this was happening when you were supposed to focus on us. But really, Trey became your best friend, not me. Maybe our past makes it hard for us to start fresh, and we can't go back to what we had. We love each other, and I know that. We share a lot together, and we have the kids. We connect well, too, but we aren't the perfect fit for each other. What happened can't be erased. We are better now, and I'm thankful that we tried and built a new relationship. But it isn't, and can't be, the new relationship we both need. We both deserve the best, and we can't be everything for each other anymore. Your closeness with Trey shows that, especially since it grew while you tried to be everything for me. There was silence again. She took a sip of her diet soda, looking down at the table, more to keep her hands busy, I think. I love you, Ryan, she said softly. I know, Deanna. I love you too. But we can't be together like that anymore. I think you know that deep down. But like I said, I believe you have a future ahead of you. You should see if Trey can be what you need. The kids and I will always be here for you. We aren't going anywhere. If the past few months have shown us anything, it's that we can get along and co-parent. We can still be friends. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, tears rolling down her cheeks. I will always love you. But I think you might be right. When I look at what you said, I'm unsure. But you're right. I'm so sorry for hurting you again, Ryan. I would never mean to do that. Please believe me. I know, Deanna, I said softly. I felt more upset seeing her cry than I did about my own feelings. I know, it's okay. You didn't hurt me. You helped me. I'm in a better place now. If I don't have my wife back, at least I have my friend and our family feels stronger. I'm not in the same place I was before. I'm still here and so are the kids. Nothing has changed there. You're always welcome for dinner and I hope we can visit you too. She managed a small, tearful smile. And Deanna, just so you know, I forgive you. I don't think you need it, but I won't hold on to anger. I need to move forward too. I hope this helps you. You have the forgiveness you need for whatever it is. Deanna stood up, walked around the table, and hugged me tightly. I received one last quick kiss, and then she left. I sat down with my beer and realized once again that I was in the city alone with no ride home. I cried, quietly, for myself this time. Well, I guess it's time to call for a ride. Trey frowned at the loud ringing of the doorbell. He was focused on his recipe, watching the bread dough rise. He needed to know when it was ready to go into the oven. He had tried adding sugars and honey to make a sweet bread. The doorbell rang again. He tossed aside the kitchen towel and shouted as he walked to the front door, "Okay, I'm coming!" He opened the door, ready to complain to the delivery person, but instead found Deanna standing there, shivering and clearly upset. "Deanna, what? Are you okay?" he asked, concerned. Deanna just stared at him, tears in her eyes. "Come in. Let me get you something," he said, confused by her distress. "Wait." She stepped inside and kissed him. It was an unexpected kiss, full of feeling. Trey was surprised, but quickly kissed her back. They pulled away when they both needed to breathe, looking at each other in silence. "I had to be sure," Deanna whispered, her gaze still locked on Trey. "I never thought I would have this chance," Trey replied, his eyes glistening. "Please, come in." He invited Deanna inside and shut the door behind them. So that's the story, pretty much. She left. I don't know where she went, but I can guess. I stayed and finished my drink. I should have had dinner, but I wasn't hungry. I thought about calling for a ride, but in the end I took the train downtown and then planned to take a train out to Naperville to sort things out. One thing I knew was that I didn't blame Deanna this time. I still found myself questioning everything. I wondered why I didn't feel the same way she did. Why didn't I react in the way I should have? She seemed to do everything right in that moment. While I had my moment of understanding, I still couldn't shake the questions about my feelings. I didn't want to feel this way, especially after learning about her connections with Trey, which seemed innocent on the surface. I still struggled to understand it. I knew how I felt, but I couldn't explain why. It just wasn't there. There were many feelings, but not that "I want to be with you forever" feeling. It had been there, and now it wasn't. But in a way, this realization set me free. All the self-doubt and questions about what I did wrong were still in my mind, but they no longer weighed me down as much. It felt a bit lighter, enough for me to move forward. Once she left, it felt like I had been waiting for something, and that feeling was gone. I didn't want her to disappear from my life completely. We had too much history together, and of course the kids. I still cared for her, just not in a way that made her my whole life. I realized I was more hurt than I thought. I spent a lot of time wondering if it was my fault after all. She really tried hard. Looking back, I see I was too broken. I had gotten better enough to keep living, but not enough to truly enjoy life or let loose. It took this change to help me get there. The important part was that she married Trey just over a year later. Paula was her maid of honor. I didn't talk much with Deanna about it. We had dinner a few times and only talked about light topics. She took me out to a nice restaurant to tell me about her wedding plans. She didn't ask if it was okay, she didn't need to, but I could tell she was a bit worried that I would react badly. I just smiled, wished her happiness, and jokingly told her to treat Trey well. She wasn't pleased, but that didn't matter. We chatted a bit about how things would change, and that was that. Paula wouldn't stop talking about it. You'd think she was the one getting married by how much she went on about it. And who bought her bridesmaid dress? Right, it was me. I didn't mind too much. She needed to earn it. She's my new helper in the front office after school and on weekends. She does okay, but I know it won't last long. which is fine because I'm not comfortable with how much time the new artist on the team spends out there or the way he looks at her. I've been dropping hints about being protective, but he just talks about his new gun, not getting the idea. I think I need to be clearer, something like, stay away from my girl and focus on your work. That might get through to him. Paula was really upset when she heard me having talks with Derek, the art lead we hired. She lectured me about something called white knighting, saying it was important for women to be independent, earn their own money, and make their own choices. I tuned out after a while but focused again when she talked about money. I made a comment about if she was earning money, when I could expect her to help with rent. She reacted strongly, as if I had suggested something very inappropriate. Her mother's daughter, through and through. I brought it up to Deanna during one of our regular dinners. She smiled gently, touched my chin, shook her head and said, "You are such a good dad, you poor, confused guy. You have no idea what's coming, do you?" Then she realized what she had said, grew pale, moved her hand to her mouth and stammered, "Oh, Ryan, I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" I replied gruffly, "It's okay, I know what you meant." And I really did. We couldn't keep going back to the past, and she shouldn't always worry about her words because of it. The past was gone, just like the marriage, and we didn't need to be reminded all the time. Anyway, since Paula was involved, I heard all about the wedding and even got an invitation. I'm not foolish, though. I didn't go. Instead, I spent that week enjoying a trip to Hawaii. I hung out at one of those swim-up bars where I was the only person who got out of the pool to use the restroom. Deanna took the kids for the whole week leading up to and including her wedding day. I thought that was the best gift I could give her and me too. I met her new partner a few times after Deanna and I settled things. He asked to have a drink with me to apologize, and it was awkward for him, but we got through it. I try to avoid him because it's hard to see my ex with someone else, but I manage. Deanna and I still have dinners now and then to talk about the kids, but they're less frequent than before, and that seems right. The kids mostly live with me, but they spend a good amount of time at Deanna's, and I don't mind. She's their mother as well. Simon and Polly have been my support. Polly gave me a hard time about my choices, and wouldn't stop until I finally lost my cool and told her I'd take Simon out with Solomon to meet some people. After that, she backed off a bit, and while she never apologized, she showed me a bit more understanding. Oh, and something else came up. That TV show about my story? It turns out Deanna's last action got broadcasted and interest picked up again. A production company reached out asking to include the new ending with some changes, of course. They wanted to make the story end on a happy note, so they had us make peace instead. Whatever. I really don't care. It looks like the project had gained momentum and someone liked it, so there were more papers for me to sign, including some for international rights. I received another check, which is always a nice surprise. This time I wanted to do something special, so I made sure Deanna got a share too. I received a couple of $100,000, and Deanna got $100,000. Everyone was pleased. They asked about who should play me, and I jokingly suggested George Clooney. That got some raised eyebrows, and then someone on Skype suggested Rowan Atkinson instead, saying it would be more realistic. I had to look him up. He's the English actor known for playing Mr. Bean. It seemed funny, but I thought I'd make my presence known at the premiere, whatever that looks like for a TV movie. Maybe I'd get a little wild and make it memorable. In any case, the game will be out soon, and I have to attend a big event in Los Angeles called E3, which is a video game expo. Honestly, I'm not too excited about it. On another note, I updated my profile on an online dating site and sent out some emails to see if I could get a few dates. I'm a divorcee trying to start a new business. I have 3 kids who sometimes drive me crazy. But I'm stable, I'm not clueless, and who knows, stranger things have happened, right? So, this is the year I try to find a girlfriend. It might turn into just having some fun, but that's all right. Life is what you make of it. Plus, I could really use a margarita right now. That's the end of Ryan and Deanna's story. But Ryan's journey isn't over. I enjoy writing about him, and I have more ideas for his character. He deserves some good things too, right? Readers may need to wait a little longer since I have other stories to finish, but Ryan will be back someday. Hey everyone! Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the exciting stories we have coming up. What do you think about the characters in this story? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.